Get it rolling on the Krueger Show. Hope everybody's having a great day as we continue to talk 49ers. Kyle Shanahan spoke today in Arizona, and we are joined by Jordan Elliott from Niners Nation on the Pig and a Pickle Krueger Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. Probably should turn our light on here. I got to go rolling here. I didn't even turn on the light. But Pig and a Pickle, of course, brings you the Krueger Show. Check them out. They are in Emeryville, open Wednesday through Sunday. They're in Corte Madera, open 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day of the week. The best barbecue in all of Northern California is Pig and a Pickle. Try the brisket. Say hi to Damon. Say hi to Mary. Tell them the Krueger sent you. All right, we're talking Niners with Jordan Elliott. Jordan, good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Sounds like there's been a lot going on in the last 48 hours or so. So it's a fun time.
Yeah, I mean, so John Lynch spoke at the Combine, and at the time, I thought it really sounded like they were getting ready to trade Trey Lance. I mean, it was like, Trey's got to play, and we got a team that's ready to win now, and that's the challenge. And it's like, well, wait a second. Your other quarterback's hurt. You didn't have Sam Darnold at the time. Where's the challenge? But the implication was pretty clear, was that in their mind, Trey Lance is not ready for whatever reason. Any way you want to slice it, that's kind of the takeaway. And so I kind of thought, man, I really thought they would trade him. And I spoke that into, on these live streams right at the end of the season. Then hearing that made me think they were going to trade him even more. And then hearing Lynch yesterday, where, he's talking about, Trey Lance again. And, it just sounded very much like, he's on, instead of saying he's like, it's, if somebody said, hey, Krug, love your show, man. You got Jordan Elliott on. And if I said, yeah, Jordan Elliott's on. Yeah, we really like Jordan Elliott. Okay, that'd be one thing. If I said, yeah, Jordan Elliott's on my show right now. It doesn't sound quite as much like I like Jordan. It almost sounds like I'm getting ready to replace Jordan. You know what I'm saying? So it's like for Lynch to come out and say, yeah, Trey Lance, we like him on our team right now. I don't know. Maybe I'm gravitating towards the right now, but that seemed very dubious. And then today, Shanahan kind of backed up what Lynch said, I thought. He said a bunch of things. And once again, people will kind of glom onto whatever they want. One of the things that people that really like Trey are glomming onto is that Shanahan said that, hey, he's going to have an opportunity to win back the starting job this year. But he also said a number of other things about his quarterbacks, and it doesn't all add up to Trey being here. But before I lead you in a direction, what do you think, Jordan? I mean, what you heard Kyle today, you heard John yesterday, you were in Indy and probably saw John speak face to face. What's your takeaway on where the Niners sit with their three quarterbacks right now?
I think that they just saw a sample size from Brock Purdy that for a number of reasons, mostly just unfortunate injury luck, they haven't gotten to see, especially with any continuity from Trey Lance. So I don't think it's necessarily just like they have this profound belief in Purdy that they don't have in Trey Lance. I just think that they have the tangible NFL game sample size to work off, not what we've seen in practice, not what we've seen behind the scenes, literal, live action when bullets are flying, like the actual, thing that you need to use to evaluate quarterback play. They've seen it from Brock Purdy. They haven't seen it from Trey Lance. So I think what ends up happening is there's this natural reaction to want to pit one guy against the other or lean heavily one way with, disregard to the other. And I think it really just comes down to the fact that it'd be extremely difficult to ignore what they saw from Brock Purdy, ignore the way the team kind of rallied around him, ignore the progress he was making as a rookie, and think about the ways that he could build on that going forward. So I don't think necessarily that they're just completely out on Trey Lance, but I think it's completely fair that John Lynch and anybody on the team who's spoken about it would say that, it's kind of Brock Purdy's job to lose because they've seen something from him that they haven't had the chance yet to see from Trey Lance. And it doesn't mean that they never will get the chance to, but I think it would be very irresponsible to just, kind of revert back to Trey Lance being the de facto starter just based on the draft capital invested, especially when you consider how much they've preached about, where you're drafted doesn't matter. What matters is results. What matters is what we see in practice. and it'd be very hypocritical of them to go back on that most important position in the sport. So I think everything's really, I know it's kind of a big deal right now, Larry, but I don't think anything that was said was a huge deal, to be honest. I feel like it kind of just was, like you'd mentioned, like there was a lot of buildup to this where the writing was kind of on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted this out, and these are my takeaways from Shanahan today. This is like the meat and potatoes of what I got out of it. One, Trey Lance, he said would have had a hell of a year if he had stayed healthy in 2022. Now that could either be his actual opinion, or that could be something that you say if you're trying to build somebody's trade value. Number two, he says he's always liked Sam Darnold and how he throws. And he basically said exactly that. Said that, that you can see his ability. I've always liked him as a prospect, how he throws, so on and so forth. Then when he was asked about Lamar Jackson, because there's been a lot of speculation about Lamar, he said basically he just kind of snuffed that out. He said Lamar Jackson, without directly saying it, he said it almost directly. He said he's not a fit for the Niners' current roster, and he's really not a fit for the Niners' current cap. Then he also said he intimated that the Niners need a quarterback on a rookie deal to build the type of roster that they believe can win. And he referenced Hargrave and the others, and that seemed like a necessity. That also seemed to be going towards the Lamar question. And he also said that last year Trey got reps and that they were based a lot on his draft position, but this year he intimated that he'll have to compete for those reps with Sam Darnold. Grant Cohn asked the question, will they share reps? Shanahan basically, confirmed that, yeah, Darnold and Lance will share reps with the first team this year in camp. Then also Kyle said he was asked about his quarterbacks, and he said, I think we're in a really good position at quarterback. I hope all three of our quarterbacks are with us. But then he basically went on to say kind of almost like a rehearsed line, which is, but we'll listen on anybody. And then he kind of regurgitated the line that he and John have been using, which is, hey, John, I would trade John. John would trade me. We would trade our mother if we could win. In other words, anybody's tradable. But on the heels of, I feel very good about our quarterback position. I hope all three quarterbacks are with us. But then he intimated that they're going to listen to all offers. And then I thought that was the biggest takeaway. And then also he said that Brock could be out 6 months, could be out 7 months, could be out 8 months. He said that they would know about 12 weeks after the surgery not exactly, but have an ballpark idea if it's going to be 6 months or 8 months. And then he also suggested that the elbow, there's a chance that it won't heal right, and that it could be a much more involved thing, kind of teasing almost like Brock could not play at all this year if it doesn't heal right. And then he finished up the talk when he was asked about the roster, and he's like, basically indicated that, in his mind, the Niners may go with 2 quarterbacks on the final roster. So you basically intimated that Brock's number one. You just brought in Sam Darnold. You just told us that you like Sam Darnold, and you have for a while. And you kind of intimated that you're willing to at least listen to trade offers. Isn't the handwriting on the wall that Purdy's their 1, Darnold's their hand-chosen 2, and that they're going to shop Trey during the draft? Or do you believe the penalty for doing such is so punitive that any talk of trading Trey Lance is really about next year, not this year?
I think just based on the way that the position's gone for them with the ridiculous injury luck they've had there, unless they get an offer that really, they're not going to get anywhere close to what they gave up, obviously. But if they get something that's, going to make them better immediately, maybe there's some guys in their, second, third round, if they're offered that range of compensation where they're quick to pull the, make that trade and, kind of cut their losses and absorb that dead cap hit. I could see it happening, but the financial ramifications are where I'm kind of like, to me, it doesn't make sense. Trey Lance doesn't really strike me as the kind of guy to be a, disgruntled employee that's going to be, a problem in the locker room if he isn't awarded the starting job. That's not really the vibe I've ever gotten from him. So I don't think you're really concerned about that kind of scenario playing out as well. I don't see what the rush to trade him would be unless you get one of these teams where maybe they're picking outside the top 10. They want to get a young quarterback that they can develop and they can kind of take on the project the 49ers essentially took on when they drafted Lance. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's kind of like, remember when Miami sent that second to Arizona for Josh Rosen, who, they'd quickly moved on to Kyler Murray. I don't think the Niners are going to get as high of a pick, and it obviously would be in year 3 rather than year 2. But I do think there's a similar scenario there where you get a team. Miami was picking, I think, like 13th in that draft. They weren't going to get a top quarterback. So maybe there's a team in this draft where they don't really love the quarterbacks beyond the obvious guys at the top who will probably be gone right away. And, it was just 2 years ago that a lot of these teams were doing their own homework on Lance. And there's plenty of, belief around the NFL that, hey, maybe their process was wrong. If we get this guy in our building, our coaches and our staff can develop him the right way. So there's definitely where it would play out. I just don't see the benefit right now to the 49ers. Like, I don't think the compensation they'll get back will be worth the dead cap charge they'd incur and the risk of not really ever fully finding out what you have in a guy you invested that much capital in.
It's an interesting, conversation because there's so many unknowns. Let's go back to his first comment on Lance. He said, Shanahan said that he felt like Lance would have had a hell of a year had he stayed healthy. Do you agree with that?
I do. And I think that it's all relative, right? Because I think that the way that the offense was structured and the way that they were really, like, that Seattle game, it obviously didn't last long because he unfortunately got hurt early, but they were gashing that Seahawks defense, and the threat that he brought with his legs really put that defense in conflict. And I think that it's a sore subject now, Larry, because he got hurt running the ball. But the way that they were kind of constructing that offense and playing that positionless football and making defenses have to respect a quarterback who could run like that, I think the offense would have had, a good amount of success just based on that alone. And hopefully you'd see the development with more reps too. But I thought the rushing floor that he brought just with his the threat that he brought running football alone made them, a potent offense. And you could argue Seattle's defense wasn't great last year, but they really were giving them problems right before he got hurt in that game. Like, the first couple drives, they had no answer for it. And I think the Chicago game's kind of tough to judge because, field conditions. But I'm not saying they would have averaged Purdy a game like they did with Purdy down the backstretch, but I think they would have been a good offense. I think they definitely would have been in the top half of the league.
I'm not really sure what they would have been because it's hard to say. We haven't seen enough of Trey as a passer to know if, how he would do once the advanced reports, scouting reports start to circulate. Once people watch him for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, once they see what you do well and they try to turn off your water, can he make the adjustments back? I think that part is, to me, leaves me. I think he would have had a decent year. I don't know definitively. Like, his completion percentage was 48% for the year in a very small sample size. What would it have been? I don't know. I don't think it would have been 70%, but I don't know that it even would have been 60%. I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say. Could have been in the 50s. I think it would be lower than Jimmy's and Brock's, which was right around 68%, I believe. Kid Tricksta says the meltdown equals more clicks for content creators. Nothing Kyle or John Lynch said was earth-shattering. I would push back on that and say the guy that you invested all these draft picks in, Trey Lance, Kyle Shanahan just said that he is going to share reps in training camp with a quarterback in Sam Darnold that, if you look at the numbers, Sam Darnold has the worst in 55 NFL starts. He's got the lowest passer rating among all quarterbacks. He's last in completion percentage among all quarterbacks. He's third worst in interception percentage over that period of time. And now Shanahan just told you that he likes him and that Lynch or that Lance and Darnold will share reps. That's not nothing. I mean, you can say whatever you want. You can say, hey, there's nothing to see here all you want. But you invested what you invested in Lance. That's a fact. And Darnold's stats that I read to you are also facts. And you brought Darnold in, and now you're putting Darnold not into that, hey, we got to have a third guy. It's like he will compete with Trey Lance and get number one reps when Trey desperately needs like all the number one reps he could possibly handle. Now you're taking half of them and handing them to Sam Darnold, who's been a colossal failure as an NFL quarterback to this point. You don't think that's a significant story? I think it is. What do you think?
I think that I'd be very interested to hear their thoughts on Darnold coming out because, if you remember, they got Jimmy Halloween 2017, so like middle of the season. And that was the year that Darnold would have been his last year at USC. 49ers were in the market for a quarterback. I'm sure they did extensive homework on all of the quarterbacks who ended up coming out in 2018. I'm sure Darnold was in that mix too. And I know John Lynch, like at Stanford's Pro Day, when he was speaking, he mentioned that, they really liked Isaiah Oliver coming out. And he was a guy that they, had a ton of interest in coming out when he came out of Colorado. And I'd be interested to see how long they've been keeping tabs on Sam Darnold throughout his journey in New York, Carolina, because I have a strong feeling that they really liked him coming out, and the need to take a guy like that obviously dissipated when they got Jimmy Garoppolo. I think this could just be a scenario where they really, really like Sam Darnold coming out. They liked some of the traits. They liked what they saw on tape. And they're like, hey, we can get this guy for pennies on the dollar in year 5 now. So I think it's a scenario where they've always liked the traits, and the cost lined up now where it's the case where they can just kind of take a swing on a guy like that. And if he comes into camp, like I think the thing with Sam Darnold is that people are too caught up in how he played with the Jets and Panthers, both teams that have just not been very good the last few years. And they're not able to separate Sam Darnold, the individual, from Sam Darnold, the Jets quarterback, or Sam Darnold, the Panthers quarterback. I have no reason to pump up USC. I'm a Cal guy, but I watch a ton of Pac-12 ball. Sam Darnold has great arm talent. Like the arm talent is something that you can't really dispute. Like it's there. And I think if you get him in a system where we've seen far less physically gifted quarterbacks succeed, Kyle Shanahan's going to make it easier than pretty much any other offensive mind in the sport will for a quarterback. So I could see a scenario where they're like, hey, this guy has the physical traits. We have the scheme that's going to make life easier for him. There's a realistic outcome where he comes in and he looks really good here. And at the very least, we have an extremely high level backup. And given the quarterback injuries we've had the last couple of years, we don't get into a position where it's the NFC Championship game. You're on the road against a vaunted defense and you're rolling Josh Johnson in year 15 out there. So I think it's as much insurance as much as it's just like, hey, we can afford to take this dart throw now because the cost lines up with what we're able to do on the roster. Like if you look at the Niners cap space, what they've allocated to the quarterback position is very minimal. They're like 16th in the league in 2023 cap dollars allocated to the position. So I think having those rookie deals allows them to take a swing like that.
Eric Hernandez says, great showing on the Niner media bracket, Jordan. I think you might have beaten Eric Branch. Is that right?
I don't think so. I think it was, I'll be honest, I wasn't following it too closely. I know it was Rob and Levin did a great job putting it together. The one that I got hit about quite frequently was my buddy Bonte Hill at 95.7. That was one that surprised me. I didn't think I would win that one. But I don't remember, to be honest. I know Matt Barrows was the one who beat me, which is a very, very respectable loss, I feel like, on my end. Matt is just incredible at what he does. So I wasn't surprised by that in the slightest. But beyond Bonte, I don't remember who else I went up against, to be honest.
Oh, you beat Bonte. That's who you beat. You beat Bonte. Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty good. I lost to Grant. Who I think did Grant lose to Crocker? I'm not sure, but I think Grant took on Crocker in the finals. That's a
tough one. Grant is just, he's a very, I don't know I don't follow college basketball enough to know what the equivalent would be, but he would be a very tough out in any tournament because of just how charismatic and, how powerful his just overall aura is. I feel like that's a tough match for anybody. So I wouldn't feel too bad about it.
GPK all day says, look how smug Larry is when talking about Lance being traded. Let the hate of Lance flow through you. Dude, there's no hate of Lance at all. I'm the guy who thinks he's going to be good. I'm actually on record saying that I think he's going to be good. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are not on record as saying they think he's going to be good. I just don't think that. I think that the Niner timeline and Trey's development timeline is, in my opinion, do not add up, and it's really clear. Like, I expect Trey to be good. I'd be shocked if he was really good this year, and they're right now in their Super Bowl window. So how do you reconcile that? The question I would have for you is, what do you think if they did move him? What do you think they could get? Because I'm looking at a mock draft right now. This mock draft has CJ Stroud going 1, Bryce Young going 2, Anthony Richardson going 4 to the Colts, Will Levis going 7 to the Raiders. So they've got 4 quarterbacks going in the top 7. So I'm looking at the rest of the first round. You know, Tennessee may need a quarterback. They're at 11. The Jets, I don't know their situation at quarterback. They're at 13. Is New England happy with Mac Jones? They're at 14. The Commanders, who's their quarterback long-term, they're at 16. You know, Tampa, who I don't know their quarterback of the future, they're at 19. Seattle could be in the market for a quarterback. If they don't go quarterback with their top 5 pick, they could go quarterback at 20. So I'm seeing a lot of teams right there between, and you know, if Baltimore moves on from Lamar, they're at 22. You know, you got a number of teams between, let's say, 10 and 22 that may want a young quarterback, and all the top young quarterbacks are off the board. I think that might be the sweet spot for the Niners. The way I get it, my feel of it is that Lynch and Shanahan are like, hey, we don't have to make a move at quarterback. We have a quarterback. We have multiple quarterbacks. If you're desperate and you need a quarterback, our phone's open. But I bet you from 10 to 25, somewhere in there, if they get a call on Trey for offering a pick, I think they would do it.
You know, I think that like the area where I would see Trey kind of being appealing to some teams is like a team that maybe is not just starting a rebuild, but is kind of on the upswing, and who doesn't want to, either doesn't have the capital to take a big risk on quarterback this year. They're not picking top 5, or they just don't really want to take that plunge yet. They'd rather invest that first round pick elsewhere. 2 teams that come to mind for me would be Atlanta and Indianapolis, both teams who I've heard from multiple people really like Trey Lance before the draft. We're very high on him coming out. And I think that like a fair compensation at this point is probably closer, if you're lucky, you could get a 3rd round pick probably. Atlanta's picking at 75. Indianapolis is picking at 79 overall. I think that would be reasonable. That's something where I could see one of those teams being like, hey, you know, we put our 1st round pick into, you know, an edge rusher or an offensive lineman. I know Irsay recently spoke at the Combine and was talking about how the owners' meetings was talking about patience with building the roster and not rushing to get a quarterback. So maybe they invest those first couple picks elsewhere, and then, hey, we take a swing on a guy that we really liked a couple years ago. Maybe we pair him with Steichen and we can do something with this. Same thing with Atlanta. I'm not, you know, a huge Desmond Ridder guy. I haven't watched enough to feel really strong either way. But maybe you bring him in and you have a competition between 2 younger guys, and you're able to invest those early picks again elsewhere. A lot of weapons there, a lot of things to really like. That's where it's kind of coming back to, like, if you're looking for the 49ers, you have to be just completely out on him to throw in the towel at this point for a 3rd round pick. And there's good value in a 3rd round pick. You can get an impact player in the top 80 picks there. But I just feel like it would be a strong admission of we just completely messed this up. And I don't know that they're ready to take the PR hit that comes with that and the dead cap charge that will come with moving him right now, which is where I'm kind of the mindset layer. I don't think they're going to do it unless they get blown away with a trade offer, or if Trey Lance makes it abundantly clear, like, hey, like I'm not going to play here anymore. Like, this is year 3. I'm still not the guy. I need to go somewhere else. All indications we've seen that hasn't happened yet. But it just, to me, the timeline, it doesn't make sense to me on paper right now. But again, the NFL kind of makes its money on doing things that don't make sense on paper and, you know, surprising us every week. So what do I know? But I just the more I think about it, it doesn't make sense to me.
If you were Trey, would you want to be out of here or would you want to stay?
I mean, I think it's tough because looking at it now, like this situation obviously is less than ideal, right? And he hasn't gotten the public backing of support you'd hope to get as somebody that you had so much invested into. But I also think that we really don't know what's happening behind closed doors. And as much as we can read into the things that are said and what we see on the field, maybe there is an avenue where he has a realistic chance to win this job and he can prove it, because like at the end of the day, like his results are going to speak louder than anything that, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan say. And I could see a scenario where fighting hard to win the job here is a much more appealing job than going to some franchise that has no success, that hasn't been able to sustain any success. And, I think the allure of starting somewhere else is obviously very important, but I also think it depends on the landing spot somewhere else, because who's to say the same thing doesn't happen somewhere else and you're not in a building with a ton of really good players where you're on a team that's winning and the culture is the thing you always hear about with the 49ers. So I think it really just depends on what the 49ers have told Trey Lance later. Like if they've told him that he has a realistic chance to actually blow them away and win this job this offseason, I don't see how somewhere else is more appealing. But if that's just kind of lip service they've been serving and he knows he doesn't have a realistic chance, I wouldn't blame the guy at all for wanting to go somewhere else.
Mike says that I think this is a huge mistake. Trey could actually be the one, but has not been given a chance. This is typical Kyle crap. I hope if Trey gets traded, the team that gets him defeats the 49ers in the Super Bowl. Look at that. Mike getting somewhat vindictive there. Fish and Chips says Brock isn't QB1. He's QB2. Kyle is QB1. All right. There you go. I kind of look at this point and say that it might be in the Niners' best interest and in Trey's best interest to part ways. Why? Because look at what we're not in season, we're out of season, and look at how much consternation and look how much ugliness has gone back and forth today on social media over these two quarterbacks. You got content creators suggesting that if the Niners go with Brock Purdy, it's like a racist situation. I mean, that once you're going to the hot button issue of our time, where do you go from there? I mean, once you've called it out as, it's a racist situation, where do you go from there? It's like you have nowhere to pivot to. You're just, I mean, it's there. You're just putting that out in the ether with nothing, with no sources, no anything. You're just saying one guy's white, one guy's black. And if they prefer to go with the white guy, God, it's got to be, it's a racist situation. And it's just so inflaming. It's so over the top. I don't know where to me, it's just so lowest common denominator. If you have sources, if you have belief, if you have something that points to that, then bring that to the table. Otherwise, that seems really reckless. It is the hot button issue of our time, and to try to label, Shanahan or Lynch or the Niners or anybody else for that matter, who's just an advocate for one quarterback over another as now it's race related. I just think that's so over the top and so ridiculous. But I just look at the situation since people are going there. And this and that true ugliness has just begun. We haven't even gotten into anybody's actual play. At the end of the day, it might just be in the Niners' best interest to move on from Trey Lance, simply so that you have a clear cut. I mean, you heard it from Kyle. You heard it from John. They think that Brock Purdy is their quarterback going forward. And it sounded like Trey Lance will be given a chance to compete with Sam Darnold to be the backup to Brock Purdy. So if Brock's your true number one, is it a better situation to have Trey Lance and Sam Darnold? Or is it a better situation to have Sam Darnold and somebody you pick in the draft and move Trey on to a different team so he can develop and so that you can avoid this ugly back and forth that invariably is going to be parked right on their doorstep? If they said they wanted no part of this and moved Trey because of it, how could you fault them? Who wants to have a gigantic public debate where people are claiming one side's claiming the other side's racist. I mean, come on. Is that something the Niners really want? I mean, for that reason alone, I almost feel like it might be advantageous to not have Trey as the number 2 to Brock. What's your feeling on that? I mean, you've seen these people on Twitter. You've seen the insults hurled back and forth. To me, it's the tenor of the dialogue on this debate over who should be the Niner quarterback has turned really ugly really fast.
Yeah, and I think the problem with that, Larry, is that first off, I don't think that anything John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan has done has warranted that kind of criticism. The unfortunate reality is, though, Twitter is it's a great place for discussion and dialogue, but it also gives dialogue and a voice to just about anybody. And there are a lot of people that I've seen firsthand that do kind of fall into that category where there is a little bit more structure to pointing out some concerns with, it going beyond just quarterback evaluations with how some people feel about things. I've seen it firsthand. I don't think that should overtake the entire discussion, though. I don't think that a couple of idiots who have opinions that are rooted in things beyond football evaluations should have their voice take over. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the world we live in. Those are, like you mentioned, the hot button issues that end up picking up a lot of traction. I just do think it is unfortunate that the problem that I have with all of this is just we don't have, like, if Trey Lance had played a couple of seasons and didn't look great, it would be a much easier discussion, right? But the problem is that we still really don't know what he's going to be, what he's going to develop into. And I think it really falls back on the 49ers, being the ones who brought him in and made that pick. And, this is just my own speculation. But I just really wonder, like, you remember on draft day, or it was reported, I think, on draft day, the day they took Trey Lance, that they were aggressively working to try and get Aaron Rodgers from Green Bay. And they were trying to package that pick at number 3 that they had moved all those picks to move up to try and get Aaron Rodgers. And I understand Aaron Rodgers is, 4-time MVP. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But to me, that doesn't really scream conviction in your, belief in a guy that is going to be there at 3. They knew that Lawrence was going 1, and they knew that Zach Wilson was going 2. They knew Lance was going to be there at 3. And the fact that, like, on draft day, they're, like, working aggressively to get a guy who realistically only had a couple of years left. Like, and then you hear the reports from a lot of people, like, I truly do believe when they made that trade up, they did that with Mac Jones in mind. And they're like, hey, if we find somebody else along the way, great, but we'd be comfortable taking Mac Jones at 3. I don't ever get the sense that they were all collectively all in on this move. And it was something where there was confidence from top to bottom in that building. And I think that that's showing itself the farther we get into his NFL career, where that public backing and that just, sense of belief doesn't really feel like it's there. And I honestly wonder if it ever has been at an organizational level. I absolutely believe that there are people within the building who believe in Trey Lance. I think there's people who still believe in Trey Lance. But to me, it feels like something like when you make a move like that and you mortgage 3 years worth of first-round picks, which are just I think the successive teams like the Rams and some of these other teams where they've moved picks for proven players and they've gotten, championships out of it has kind of distorted the perception of just how valuable first-round picks are. To mortgage 3 years worth of first-round picks, that's something you have to make a move in lockstep with from the top of the organization all the way to the bottom. And I just don't get the sense that that was something that everybody was on board with. And then you look at the mass exodus of coaches just a year after. I just wonder how much support there's been collectively for the guy from the beginning. And I don't think it's something where it's like deteriorated along the way. I just wonder if it's ever been there along the way. And if it's just something where a select number of people in power had the vision of this guy being the quarterback of the future and everybody else just kind of had to follow suit. Because I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, Larry. It feels like there never was the just collective backing of the guy from the beginning.
Yeah, no, the consensus, and if it was there, it doesn't seem like it. And we've never really, it's like, it's really even hard to figure out. Generally, when a player's drafted, you get a pretty good handle. And sometimes the teams will tell you, hey, Adam Peters pounded the table. I mean, it came out after the draft. Adam Peters loved Ambry Thomas. Okay. And sometimes those little revelations come to the surface, or just sometimes you can just based on how a general manager or a coach or an owner or, a coordinator talks about a player, you'll get a sense of who was banging the table in the draft room for that player. But in this scenario with Trey, Lynch doesn't sound like he's Trey's advocate. Kyle doesn't sound like he's Trey's advocate. I would really love to know who was Trey's number one advocate when the pick was made, because that person's either silent or maybe it was the owner. I don't know, but if somebody was a true advocate for him at the time and is now not, are they doing that to try to save their hind and save their job? And I don't know. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like you would think a top 5 pick on a quarterback that there would be some person in the power structure that would absolutely stand up and say, I loved him. I wanted him. I guess Shanahan at one point did say that, but now, so that just I guess it just makes it right now very dubious as to, so you thought he would have had a great year and he was hurt. So now he's healthy, but now he's sharing time with Sam Darnold. It doesn't add up. You know what I mean? It's like, if he was going to have a great year, then why did you bring in a quarterback who's failed in other spots? And why are they on equal footing today? There just seems to be a lot of, it's like every time they talk about their quarterbacks, it seems to lend itself to wanting to ask more questions. It doesn't necessarily put anything to bed. Have you noticed that? We never seem like we get any real, like, yep, now we know. It's like, it always just begs more questions.
Oh, John, I've said this to a number of people. I think John Lynch would be an incredible politician. He is so good at answering your question in a way that you're kind of nodding your head and going along. And then when you get to the end of the answer, you're like, I was just given nothing. This was nothing. A total nothing burger, but you're kind of, it's a very elegant nothing burger. It's not just a quick dismissal. And I think that there's, a tactic to that. And I also think that, while fans want to know things, I don't think that, any fan is entitled to know things. So I do think that there is this fine line of it would be great to get answers, but I can also understand why they're not quick to just, make every fan that wants to know all these details happy by telling them everything they want to know in one media session. But yeah, I agree. I think that there is so often this thing where you have to sit down, you have these media sessions, and it's kind of this, you're strung along to the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's where, to me, you have to just kind of fall back on the actions that speak louder than the words. And when you bring in a guy like Sam Darnold with that incentive laden deal, there's a number of veteran quarterbacks they could have brought in to insulate. If they really believed in Trey and Brock and that was the future of those two guys, there's a number of guys they could have brought in. But going after a guy like Sam Darnold, and again, I know people think the guy sucks. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are surprised with the reports you hear out of training camp, out of the offseason program. And when you start to see him even in the preseason, the guy can throw a football. He has the physical traits. He just hasn't had the ideal situation. And, one of my favorite parts about going to the combine there is you talk to these people all around the league. And I remember I was talking to a scout from a team in the AFC East, and he was telling me, he's like, man, there's nobody in the NFL that makes life easier for offensive players than Kyle Shanahan. He dream destination for a guy. Because I was talking to him about, kind of Trey in the future and things like that. And that's something where I feel like here people think that, it's just we're in this bubble of 49ers world, right? We just think Kyle's this genius. The NFL thinks he's this genius too. And there's a lot of people that would love to be in the position that these young players are in at the quarterback position playing for them now. So I think that the action of bringing in Sam Darnold speaks volumes. And I would be very surprised if he didn't have a legitimate shot to, as much as they like Brock Purdy, I think Sam Darnold's a guy that has a chance to compete with him for the starting job too. And it may sound crazy right now, but I really believe that they brought him in with that in mind.
The rap sheet, Ian Rappaport, went on the NFL Network today and basically said that if things go the way they've gone, that Sam Darnold will be the starting quarterback for the 49ers. Why do you think he would have said that? I mean, that one really was what? Why? Why would Sam Darnold automatically beat out Trey Lance for the starting job? And what does he mean by that? It's almost as if somebody whispered to to Ian Rappaport, yeah, it's going to be Purdy or Darnold starting week 1. And then he just is like trying to kind of describe the scenario in which he envisions it. That was a very peculiar comment. Did you see that at all?
I did, yeah. And I think this comes back to, right, like, remember the Mac Jones to the 49ers reports? Everybody's like, oh, media really doesn't know anything. I think that a lot of those guys, they wouldn't report those things unless they were getting it from a very credible source. And, it's not 100% as evidenced by the Niners picking Lance and not Mac Jones. But somebody like Rappaport's not going on air and saying something like that unless he has it from pretty strong authority that's a very realistic outcome. He's not somebody who's paid to speculate. He's somebody who's paid to have good information and report on good information. And he's the best in the business at doing it, right? So, yeah, I'm with you. I think that is definitely something that, and the other thing too, Larry, is he signed almost immediately in free agency, like
with incentives, complex incentives.
Like that to me speaks volumes too, where it was like, hey, I'm willing to bet on myself in this great environment, because I'm not saying that teams would have been, knocking down the door to bring Sam Darnold onto their team, but I think there absolutely would have been a market for him. And the fact that he was willing to sign an incentive-laden deal so quickly right away tells me that the 49ers were like, hey, this is the situation. We really like this, this quarterback who started for the, backstretch of the season. He has an elbow injury that's very peculiar and uncommon for players that play football. We don't know the timeline. Here's a realistic opportunity for you to, kind of revitalize your career and be the guy. And that's the thing. I think everybody immediately was like, oh, he's going to be quarterback 3 or quarterback 2. Like, I don't think he signs that deal unless there is a tangible discussion that they had where he was given an opportunity to bet on himself and with his own performance have a chance at the starting job. I don't think he would have signed right away just to be the backup and hold the clipboard.
I agree. I think somebody promised something to Darnold, and I think somebody whispered something to Rappaport. Artur Gazarian says, don't you guys think Darnold and Trey sharing reps, maybe Kyle motivating Trey with competition, given that Purdy is injured and cannot compete in camp? I've never heard that Trey lacked motivation. In fact, every time. The other thing is, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, when they do come up to talk about Trey, anytime it comes to them, to any kind of dialogue about Trey, do you notice that they're like, well, first of all, Trey's just a great guy. I mean, they will go out of their way to say what a great person he is, but they will not compliment him in any aspect of playing the position of quarterback. They never, he really sees the field. Oh, he's really accurate. We really know we can win with him. They'll say, oh, he's a great guy. I mean, he's a terrific guy. So it's like, they're basically, to me, it's like, listen to what someone says. Listen to what they don't say. When someone says they're a terrific guy, and they don't say anything about your quarterback play, and they're your NFL head coach and your NFL GM, maybe they're not fans of what they're seeing of your quarterback play. At least the question needs to be asked. Sacktown Izzy says Lance only played 1 game with Kittle. And then he goes on to say 0 with CMC, but Krug will never mention that. I just did. Do you think that is a factor? Do you think that Trey Lance would have been worlds better with Kittle and CMC, and that those two weapons are really the key as to why Lance hasn't done what Lance should do?
I think it's fair to point out that he hasn't had those guys, and that it would make any quarterback better to have players as talented as that. But this is where I would push back on it being the end-all, be-all, or the reason why, there maybe was this perception, of a difference in talent or whatever. A lot of the throws that you're hitting to CMC in the flat, or you're hitting to Kittle, the quick timing, rhythm-based stuff, like I've watched every throw that Trey Lance has made in camp over the last 2 years, and those were the ones that he was struggling with the most. Like he threw a great deep ball. I thought he did a good job extending plays. The things that really, in my eyes, like I felt like there was the biggest room for growth was that quick timing, was that check down to the flat. Like there were a couple throws I remember where he had a guy at the flat wide open on a check down where he's missing like not a slight like 3-4 yards away. And that's where I'm kind of like, I don't know how much of a difference it makes if that improvement isn't made there. So yes, it would make any quarterback better, but is it the reason why he wasn't playing as well? Like, no, I don't think so, because I think even if those guys are on the field, the quarterback has to get the ball to them in a timely and efficient manner. And to me, that's kind of been where the perception from the 49ers point of view is where they really believe in Brock Purdy, and maybe where there's some hesitance with Trey Lance, is they know right now they have Kittle, they have Debo, they have CMC, they have Ayuk. They just need somebody who's going to effectively distribute the ball to those guys. And Purdy proved that he could do it. That doesn't mean Lance can't do it. It just means that it would be extremely risky to move off of the guy who's proven capable of doing it for a guy who frankly hasn't done it consistently because he hasn't had the consistent reps and sample size yet. So I think, to answer your question, like, yes, it would help, but I don't think it's fair. Like, people act like that's the reason why, like, there were some struggles there. Like, I think those struggles were there in camp when he was throwing to all of those guys, and you were there. Like, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. You know, everybody sees things differently there, but I can think off the top of my head of a number of throws that Brock Purdy was making that Trey Lance wasn't during camp, and I think that has to be factored into the discussion as well.
All right, so I'm sitting at camp. I'm sitting at mini camp, and I'm thinking Brock Purdy's the most accurate quarterback on the field. Then I'm watching it in training camp. I'm like, Brock Purdy's the most accurate quarterback on the field. But there was also arm strength that seemed to be requisite. He seemed to have enough arm strength. But when I really was convinced that Brock had some it factor was when they started moving the pocket, and then he was throwing on the run, and he was hitting guys in stride. That's a ball that, when anytime you're moving your feet, now it's like you may miss right or left, but you may miss up or down. And it really puts it adds another layer of difficulty to being accurate when you're on the move. And then when you see a guy who's accurate on the move, you're like, wow, this guy's accurate. Brock Purdy was easily the most accurate guy, but to me, it was also about he had good zip on his passes. What I saw with Trey was he'd throw, the layup passes that you have to make. He'd make like about 70% of them. 7 of every 10, he would throw perfect. 3 of those would be airmailed and would land, 15 yards out of bounds. So that's what I saw from him. And then also there was a lot of plays where the ball's got to come out in camp. If the quarterback's holding the ball at the end of the play, more than once or twice a practice, that's not good. That means that he went through his progressions, didn't get rid of the ball, was indecisive, the window's closed, and he had no one else to throw to. The play basically ended, and so he jogged around with the ball. That happened, I would say, 6-7 times a practice where he was holding onto the ball, and he really shouldn't have been holding on the ball. He should have gotten rid of it, but he just missed the window. He had 2 windows to throw it in, missed both windows. Now he just kind of held it. So I just saw that the ball's got to come out on time with accuracy and touch. And I saw it come out on time with accuracy and touch with Brock Purdy. And with Trey, it came out occasionally on time, occasionally accurate, and rarely with touch. So that's what I saw. And then when we got into the preseason games, I thought Trey played pretty well, but we still didn't see any of the touch. I don't know that I've seen him to this moment really throw more than a couple touch passes. Everything's hard. He's got the hard, the deep cuts and the hard outs, and he's got enough arm strength, but he also has a little bit of a hitch. So he brings it from here, back here, and then he goes forward. So if you're one of these guys that, studies quarterbacks and you're a DB and you're studying your film, I think one of the flaws in his game right now is that he's got a little bit of a hitch. He doesn't have the ball back here and everything's forward. Everybody's got a little hitch, a little startup mechanism. He's got kind of a bigger hitch. So when you have a bigger hitch, that means that as soon as you go into your motion, they're breaking on this as opposed to the ball's back here and they're breaking on that. And just quick. They're breaking on him, bringing it back, and then bringing it forward. And I just think that you're going to see DBs jump his routes a lot because he's got that hitch. And I think it's a big part of his arm strength and his throwing mechanism. So I don't know if he can overcome it or not. But that's the only – if you want to say is there a flaw, that's the only flaw that I saw in Trey. As far as he's got a little bit of hitch, and everybody's got a little hitch, but his hitch is a little bit bigger. That's it. Other than that, I didn't see a flawed player at all. GTC Real says the 49ers really squandered 3 first-round picks just to trade Trey for a second-rounder. Laughing my ass off. As soon as Brock is back, quarterback power until he snaps a leg. Shaking my head. Okay. I mean, there's just a lot of frustration on a lot of there's just a lot of uneasiness right now about the quarterback situation in San Francisco. And I think there's just a lot of unknowns. But I'll say this, as somebody who stood in that locker room, I thought by the end of the year, the 2 guys that were the most pro Purdy in the room were George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. And it made sense because George Kittle maybe had the greatest productive stretch of his career with Purdy. And Ayuk, I think, just loves the accuracy of Purdy and the fact that he throws a very catchable football. Those 2 guys, toward the end of the year when I did interviews with them, and you can go look at those interviews on YouTube on the Krueger Show channel page, you can see for yourself. I mean, those guys were glowing in their assessment of Brock. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he was accurate, on time, and the ball came out on time with accuracy and touch. All right, let's hit Brandon Ayuk. They picked up the 5th-year option, or at least they indicated they were going to. They have until May to make the decision. It's for $14 million. There's been a lot of trade rumors surrounding Brandon Ayuk. What do you think happens there? Do you think Ayuk gets traded? Do you think that, there's people that have suggested that when you look at the 2024 cap hit of Debo and Ayuk, that it's not sustainable to have both those guys on that 2024 roster. That's still a year off in the distance. But do you see the Niners moving on from Ayuk or Debo, one or the other? Which guy's more likely to be here long term?
Honestly, I think they'll both be here long term. I think they would look elsewhere before making that tough decision. I think especially in both of their cases, they're both Kyle's guys, and I think that carries a little bit of extra weight given the fact that they were basically handpicked, picks by Kyle. And I think Ayuk, his ability to separate and beat man coverage he's among the best in the league at that. Really good after the catch, a really underrated player after the catch. I think we've just gotten so accustomed to seeing Debo Samuel and George Kittle run through people that it kind of overshadows the ability of Brandon Ayuk to kind of be shifty and get around people. I think he is a number 1 receiver in this league. And I think that the 49ers are at a spot now where, because they have Purdy and Lance and this cheap quarterback room, you could buy yourself a couple extra years of, having more blue chip guys on the roster than you typically be able to. And I think that kind of comes back to what you'd mentioned earlier. We're like, hey, we want to build this roster with these rookie deals in place. So I'd be very surprised. But if you would have asked me, in the offseason before Buckner got traded, if I thought he would get traded, I would be like, absolutely not. Like, he's a fixture of this team. He's a foundational piece of this roster. So I don't think you could completely rule it out. But I do think it is something that the 49ers aren't going to be looking to do. And I don't think it's a scenario where, okay, Brandon Ayuk came in with these really high contract demands. We're just going to pivot and tell his agent to find a trade and we'll work something out. Because they could get a 1 for him easily. I think that any wide receiver needy team in the league would give up a first-round pick for him in a heartbeat. But I also think that it would be a scenario where, as good as he was when he first came in, you've seen the big leaps he's taken the last couple seasons. And I think that Kyle especially would be just gutted at the thought of taking this guy, developing him. He's this true number 1 caliber receiver, and then another team's going to get his prime years. And I do also wonder, too, if they have some reservations now, just given the way that their first-round pick has gone. Like, the picks they've taken in the first round haven't exactly, been something to write home about. So I do wonder if that gives them some reservation, too, where they're like, hey, we're just hitting the jackpot year after year with day 2 and day 3 picks. We shouldn't have this proven blue chip talent for a dart throw next year on a guy that might be good. And I don't think they're in a spot later where financially they'll have to do it. So I would be very surprised if they end up trading Brandon Ayuk. It would be because of money if it does happen, but I'd like to think, given the way that their cap is structured, they could find a way to make it work for a couple of years.
I think Brandon Ayuk would be the number 1 wide receiver in this draft. Is there any wide receiver that you like in this draft more than you like Brandon Ayuk?
Not even close, to be honest. I mean, I don't think it's a great wide receiver draft, to be honest, just in general. I really like Zay Flowers out of Boston College, but, there's not a ton of guys where I'm like, this is going to be a, great player at the next level. And I think Brandon Ayuk is a great player at that NFL level. So, yeah, I think undoubtedly any team that's looking to add a receiver, I think they would give up a first-round pick for Ayuk in a heartbeat, especially considering he has this year and then next year on the fifth-year option at a very affordable rate before they'd even have to consider extending him. So I think that, yeah, he would be the number one option for sure.
I was listening to Dave Lombardi the other day, and Lombardi came out and said that he felt like Shanahan and Lynch, and I don't know if he had a source on this, he probably did, went to Jed York and right before free agency and said, Jed, we need you to open up the pocketbook for Javon Hargrave. We want to build a great, dominant defensive line. We felt like we used to have the best defensive line in the game. We feel like we've taken a step back the last couple of years. We need big-time cash to throw at these free agents and not like tomorrow deferred cash. We need upfront cash. And they wound up giving up, and, Jed agreed. Went with it, gave him $40 million. They gave it to Hargrave, and they signed Hargrave. To me, I just think that Jed gets a bad rap. There's a lot of people that love to beat up the son of a billionaire, and it's just so easy. Nobody wants to rip Shanahan. Shanahan's kind of cool. Nobody wants to rip Lynch. Lynch is totally likable. Nobody wants to rip the players. But, man, Jed? Yeah, Jed this, Jed that. Jed inherited this team, and he thinks he hit a triple. He was born on third base, and all this stuff comes out. I think Jed gets a bad rap. Jed wants to win. Jed wants to win really badly. Was Jed born into wealth? Yeah, Jed was born into wealth. All the more reason why his financial future has never been in doubt. He's always been about the W. And I think he's about it more now than ever before. And I see a guy who desperately wants to get that sixth Lombardi, that maybe even Jordan will be vindicated with Dr. John and Denise to some level on any mistakes he's made in the past, if he can get this done. I see a guy who's all in on the sixth Lombardi. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of Eddie D after the initial, struggles that Eddie D had with, trading for O.J. Simpson and hiring, Joe Thomas to be the GM. Eddie made some mistakes. Jed made some mistakes. But I think Jed gets a bad rap. I think he's all in on winning. Give me your assessment of Jed and kind of the Niner ownership, where they're at in this whole thing.
Yeah, I think that the problem too is that, like, a lot of people, I feel like, perception of Jed York is still stuck 10 years ago from when there was much more publicized, the feud with, Harbaugh, obviously, and the kind of the things going on. There's a lot of leaks in the building, that kind of allegiance to Balky over Harbaugh, which in the long run, I think everybody would agree, kind of proved to be the wrong decision. I think that Jed York, like anybody else, is going to get better the more experience they get doing something, right? And it's so funny that while they're playing for much higher stakes in the NFL, whether it's owners, players, I understand, but they're not so different in a lot of ways than you or I or anybody else watching this. Any job you do, you're going to get better the more experience you have doing it. You're going to get more comfortable. You're going to learn from your mistakes, hopefully. And I think that Jed York is a guy where he's gotten better the longer he's been in this position. And I think that the most telling sign of that is, think of how infrequently you really hear from Jed York, or you hear something about, like, I think he's taken a step back. And when he brought in John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan 6 years ago, part of that agreement was, hey, I'm going to take a step back. You guys run the football side of things. We'll handle the business side of things. And I think because of that kind of hands-off approach, you've seen the 49ers be able to cultivate this culture and cultivate this, run of success that they've had. It obviously hasn't resulted in the Super Bowl yet, but they've been an objectively successful team the last few seasons. And I think a lot of that does start at the top with Jed York. And it does start with his willingness to do things like you just mentioned, where I think there's this perception where, net worth and liquid cash are two totally different things. And I think a lot of times people just assume they're the same thing, Larry. There's a lot of owners that wouldn't be willing to cough up $40 million overnight, or wouldn't be willing to, have the liquid assets given up immediately and not be a deferred payment or an escrowed payment. And I think that, having that relationship where Kyle and John could go to him and there's that trust where they're like, they're going and asking for that sum of money and he's willing to do it because he's like, hey, these guys have delivered results for me the last 6 years. Like there is a symbiotic relationship that absolutely wasn't there 10 years ago between head coach and ownership and front office, whatever you want to call it. So I think he's done a fine job. And I think he's done a really good job again of just kind of like stepping back and allowing the football side of things to take care of itself and being a resource for them when they need it, but not overstepping his bounds and getting in the way of things. And I think that that's been echoed by the comments you hear from John, Kyle, and just from the actions. Like, again, owners' meetings are this week. Other than that, when do you ever hear from Jed York? He's just kind of sitting back, doing his thing and not overstepping his bounds. And you can't say the same for every other owner in the NFL. So that alone, I think, is a very valuable thing.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. He's not Joe Lacob. I mean, if you go into Joe Lacob's office, Joe Lacob probably has opinions about guys in the lottery. Jed York is not walking through the offices saying, "Man, Jair Brown, Jair Brown, guys. Hey, you know what? Me and the missus, we really like Jair Brown. Rajon Wright. I mean." I don't think Jed's that guy. I think Jed's a businessman, and Jed's not a football guy. And I think, unfortunately for the Warriors, Joe, I think, is a wannabe basketball guy. And I'd much rather my owner be a businessman and not a wannabe sportsman. You know what I mean? And maybe Joe Lacob's great. No, I'm sorry, but maybe Joe Lacob's an awesome evaluator of talent. I don't know. I'm not even evaluating that. I'm just saying, stay in your lane, and I really believe when it comes to certain things, it's important that you stay in your lane.
Yeah, and you can do both, right? Like, I think there's value in being able to identify a good football mind or a good collective football mind, with the brain trust of John Lynch and Kyle and Adam Peters and all these guys they've had. So they're definitely, you still can be involved, but I think, just like you mentioned, like getting involved in the day-to-day stuff, like, I it's so funny because I think so many people there, like, you've lived it. Like, people overlook how much these guys in these roles eat, sleep, and breathe football. Like, they're going weeks at a time without seeing their families. They're traveling all over, doing all the, it's remarkable how much, and still a very few or a very small percentage of them are getting things right at a decent rate, right? So for a guy who's handling all the things that a billionaire is dealing with on their own to just kind of casually check in here and there with your opinions on stuff, to me, it creates a dynamic that it undermines the hard work that everybody beneath you is doing. And to me, just the sense that I get, I feel like Jed York's done a fantastic job of being a resource when needed and when they need to call upon him, but not overstepping his bounds. Like, I don't think he's the kind of guy where he's like poking into these scouting sessions before the draft and poking in on the draft room, scanning the room, making sure they're doing what he wants. I think he has appointed the people that he believes in, and he's allowing them to operate the way they see fit. And I can speak for myself personally. The best I've ever been in the jobs I've had is when I've been given freedom to operate and had somebody who's my superior trust me to operate my job and do things my way. And I think Jed York's done that with Kyle and John Lynch, and we've seen the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. One of the reasons I love having Jordan on is he can go deep on any aspect of football, and he can just go right there with me. If I go to an obscure place, man, you can be there right there with me, obscure. I got to bring up the Niner offensive line edition. It wasn't sexy, but they went after Matt Pryor, an offensive tackle / offensive guard, and Pryor, is an interesting player on a lot of fronts. But what I've noticed is with Feliciano and Pryor, they're going for big-bodied offensive linemen. No longer are they going for these guys who are real quick, though Brendel was re-signed. But Pryor is 6'7", 332. Feliciano is like 325 pounds. He's as wide as a house. I mean, seriously, this guy is a really broad player. And I'm just kind of wondering what you think. I mean, do you think this is a new emphasis on trying to add size to their offensive line? What do you think of those two pickups? Is Feliciano here to be insurance against Brendel? Is he here to maybe be the starting right guard and kick Burford out to right tackle? Is Pryor here as a swing tackle? Is he here to compete with Colton McKivitz? Is he here to back up Colton McKivitz? Is he more of a guard? What do you see with Pryor? What do you see with Feliciano? And what do you see as far as the trend of going with these? These are huge offensive linemen compared to what the Niners typically have done in the past.
I think it's just kind of reflective of the Niners and Kyle Shanahan trying to stay, a step ahead of NFL defenses. I think, especially if you look back on like that 2019 season, they had a ton of success running that wide zone, outside zone, the Alex Gibbs, zone scheme, whoever you want to attribute it to. People call it the Shanahan scheme, whatever you want to label it. And NFL defenses have done a really good job of adapting and countering that. I think it started, one of the big swings we saw was that Rams team in 2018 that went to the Super Bowl. You saw the success they had early on in the year. And they started seeing fronts that presented a problem for that offense. And everything in their offense revolved around that. The play action was set up off of it. And a lot of the success they had early on when they were steamrolling teams ended up not being there. They scored 3 points in the Super Bowl when the Patriots had a great counter for it. And if you look at the 49ers the last couple of seasons, they've shifted to a lot more gap scheme stuff. They're running a lot more power. They're running a lot more counter than we saw early on with Kyle's tenure. So I think it just kind of mirrors the philosophy of the offense in general. And it just, in my eyes, is a proactive move to not be so dependent on having those agile, lighter fleet of foot, offensive linemen that can get out in space. It's great if you can do both. But I think that Kyle's finding more value in that gap scheme stuff, which is why, hitting on a guy like Elijah Mitchell has been so big for them, because he's able to really grind out those tough yards between the tackles. And if you look at some of their draft picks, I think that's why they traded up for a guy like Trey Sermon. It didn't work out, but if you go back and you watch Sermon's college tape at Ohio State, he had tremendous balance through contact, really good vision when he was running between the tackles. And it didn't really fit the mold of kind of those seedy one-cut guys that they had taken in the past. So between that, the Aaron Banks pick, I thought kind of mirrored that too. Banks is a big-bodied guy at Notre Dame. He was, to be honest with you, not a guy I really spent any time at all scouting, because he didn't really fit the mold of that lighter offensive lineman. So I think that it's just kind of a philosophical change, Larry. I think it's something where they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of that agility to get out in space in return to get a guy who can really pull is a big deal. Like guys that can pull, they're running counter so much that having a guy like Burford, having guys like Banks that can really pull and hit those blocks moving laterally is a big deal. So I would say just it's a philosophical thing more than anything.
It's interesting. First of all, Elias Soto, who contacted me the other day. Elias, I love some of your tweets. He says Purdy wowed in his first starts. Lance was mediocre. Peter says Lance says he sees ghosts, or Sam Darnold says he sees ghosts. Yeah, we do remember seeing that. Is offensive tackle this year's safety in the draft for the Niners? And what I mean by that is, oh man, we got to get a safety. We got to get a safety. We got to get a safety. The draft came and went last year. They got no safety. And then when the draft was over, here came Tayshaun Gibson. Here came the compliments for Talanoa Hufanga, and it all worked out. I know we're all kind of geared up for a tackle, especially since D tackle and O tackle were kind of the primary needs, and they went and got Javon Hargrave. Are they going with McKivitz? Or do you think they're going to have a competition? Or are they going into the draft looking for that offensive tackle? Or is it possible that, all the top tackles are typically in the top half of the first round, or let's say the top 25 picks, and the Niners just philosophically, because they don't pick to the 90s, are like, we can't get a tackle there, so we'll just go the veteran route this year. Do you think they'll draft an offensive tackle to compete, or do you think it's McKivitz's job to lose?
I think they'll end up taking one. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be penciled in for 99 or wherever they end up picking. It's just as good as a guy looks on tape. It's really hard to have a guy come in as a third round pick, even if you trade up into like the back, it'd take a lot, but if they traded up into like the back end of the second or something like that, it's very difficult to envision that person being a day one starter. You'd have to really hit a home run with that pick and get somebody who's mentally and physically up to the standards that it's going to take. I think oftentimes and I fall victim to this too. Like you look at a guy on tape who looks really good in college and you overlook how big of a leap it is to the next level. And just there's this expectation where we typically, and again, I'm included in this as well, we have this lack of patience with some of these guys where, hey, this guy's drafted, he looks good, I like his college tape, he should be able to come in right away and start. And we overlook that some of these guys just need a little bit of time to develop. They need a little bit of time to come into their own. And I think that the 49ers might take a guy with one of those picks with 2024 more in mind than this year. I think they believe they can win now if McKivitz is their starter. And, you get a guy like Pryor, I think taking the chance on the veteran, you're just adding more bodies to a competition where your odds are increasing of finding somebody you like, the more people you have involved. But I don't think that there is, this belief where it's like, hey, right tackle is a big need. No matter what, we're taking a right tackle with one of those third-round picks, or we're going to package to move up. Because from the homework I've done in this draft, I don't see that there's a guy there where you could confidently come away feeling like this guy is going to immediately win that right tackle job from day one. And it wouldn't be fair to expect them to, assert themselves as the starting tackle from day one.
If I'm reading that wrong, and they are going tackle, and they're going tackle with one of those 3 picks they have right there around 100. Who's your favorite tackle that you think might be on the board? Jordan went to the combine, everybody. So, Jordan's got some knowledge on these players that the rest of us really don't have, just because he saw their interviews and he had a chance to be around them. Is there a tackle? I think, Paris Johnson, Pete Skoronski, Broderick Jones, I think those guys for sure around 1. Anton Harrison, Darnell Wright, even Bergeron. I wouldn't be surprised if there were 5 or 6 tackles that went in round 1. It's that next group that made, or maybe it's even guys a little further down the list. Is there an offensive tackle that you like?
Yes, I really like Tyler Steen from Alabama. He was a Vanderbilt transfer, went and played left tackle for them. I thought he was really good in pass protection. I wrote an article last week where I highlighted a couple of his plays. I went back and watched a couple of his games. He's very agile, has a lot of power, is somebody who I think could be somebody that, again, where you're not expecting them to start from day one, but you could develop. And then there's another guy who I really like, and I really hope I don't mess up the pronunciation of the name because it is it's quite a long one, but it's the Oregon tackle, Malasale Amave Lalu. I don't know if you had the chance to watch him at all, but he's very big, very agile. He's a guy who I think would be a great developmental prospect for them. I heard it from a pretty credible person that Adam Peters was in attendance at Oregon's Pro Day too. So I think that that's interesting because I think he might have been a guy they went up there to go get a look at in person, and he would be available. And just from what I'm seeing from big boards and mock drafts and all that, more towards day 3, where maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable using those thirds on a more pressing need. And then you take the developmental tackle later in the draft. But I don't know if you've had the chance to watch him, Larry. He is big. He's 6'6", 331, just a mountain of a human being, but extremely agile and has the ability to get out in space too. So I think he would fit a lot of the check a lot of the boxes the Niners typically look for, and you wouldn't have to move up to get him or invest a ton of capital. I think he'd be a perfect fit just based on where he's projected to go and what he would bring to the table.
Yeah, I love Tyler Steen. Steen is really interesting. First of all, his father played at LSU. Has a military background. This guy went to the same high school as Bosa, I believe. St. Thomas Aquinas, right, in Florida. Isn't that where Bosa went? And This guy's a former, one of the traits I love with offensive linemen is if they used to be defensive linemen. And also versatility. This guy played right tackle as a sophomore. He played left tackle as a junior. He was an all-SEC member in 2021. He's a smart kid. I think intellect is really vital on the offensive line for the Niners because they use so many different formations and so shifting and motion, and it's just there's a lot going on. I think you have to be really intelligent to play O-line for them. So Steen would be nice, and I think he could be on the board. How about tight end? To me, I've spent a couple days looking at the tight ends. The guy that I really kind of like, the more I watch him, as far as value, is the Michigan kid Schoonmaker, who it's a deep, talented class for sure. I think 6 or 7 tight ends are going to go in the first 3 rounds of the draft. But this guy ran, the fifth fastest time among the tight ends at Indy at 4.63 at a 1.59 10-yard split. He's a great competitor. He's 6'6", 250, but you look at the frame, I think he could easily be 6'6", 265. At Michigan's Pro Day, he had a 6.81 3-cone drill. That would have been faster than all of the other receivers at the combine, except for Jackson Smith Nigba from Ohio State. So I really like him. I think he's an excellent blocker. He's got strong hands. He's a little older. He's 25, but you're going to see that, coming out of the pandemic, that there's a number of players in the draft every year for the next couple of years that are going to be a little on the old side because they were granted extra years of eligibility. I like Schoonmaker at tight end. I also like the kid from Purdue quite a bit. Do you have a Payne Durham? Do you have a favorite tight end in this? I mean, Michael Mayer is my favorite, but I think, he didn't have great workout numbers. I think he's going to go in the 20s anyway, well before the Niners pick. If they could get Michael Mayer, I'd be all for it. But if it's somewhere in their range, right around 100, I think Schoonmaker from Michigan would be my guy. Which tight end do you think is a good fit for them?
I am 100% all in on Davis Allen from Clemson. The more and more I watch the guy, the more I'm like, this is the 49ers guy. He would be perfect for what they need. He's 6'6", 245, has massive hands. He has 10-inch hands. Really, really good at those 50-50 contested catches. I think that's something that you could argue for a skill group that's so heavily predicated on yards after the catch. There isn't really that big-bodied, threat at that size that can go up and win. I wrote an article, or he was involved in an article I wrote last week. It was him, Steen, and then Viliami Fehoko from San Jose State. I did a little background on each of those guys, and I put some of the clips up. Or if anybody follows me on Twitter, it's probably the last few days if you scroll on my account. He had a game-winning touchdown against Wake Forest in overtime where he went up and high-pointed a ball and ended up going back down into the ground, just had the body control, the balance, the hands to go up and get it. I'm all in on it. And the thing that really sold me was he was not just a capable blocker. You could tell he took the challenge of blocking head on, and he was finishing guys, into the sideline, burying guys into the turf 20 yards away from the play. And that's the kind of thing to me that probably would really get the 49ers going and get them, really to fall in love with a prospect, is seeing that kind of energy blocking nowhere near the play and having that just mentality of not shying away from being that kind of, physical presence at the position. I think he should be there with the 99, 101, 102, one of those picks. So I really like him. I saw the comment flash about Laporta. I really like Laporta. He was my favorite tight end from the combine, but I keep hearing he's going to go in the second round. I hear a lot of teams really like him. So if he's there, I would love it. I think he's a great player too. I just don't know that he is really going to be there. And for me, I hate boxing myself into just one guy, but I'm so on board with Allen now that to me, it almost would be a disappointment if it's anybody else. I'm trying to step away from that because I don't think that's a healthy way of looking at things. But man, I think he's a really good player. I think he'd be a great fit for the 49ers.
Our guy Brad Graham is a big fan of Davis Allen too. If I remember, I think Brad was touting him as well, and I think Brad's got a pretty good eye for it. All right, let me give you the player that I'm hot to trot on this week. All right, and I don't even think there's a need here. And if you told me, do the Niners need this player? No, they don't need this player, but I still would draft this player, and that's Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina. To me, this guy is so fast. He's basically a Raheem Mostert type running back. He's the son of Anthony Mitchell, who played in the NFL at safety. This guy was not a great recruit out of high school. He was a 3-star recruit. He went to Eagles Landing Christian Academy, and the guy was awesome in high school. He had 118 rushing touchdowns, but it's the speed. He's 5'8", 185, but the stop and start ability, the 2 steps full speed, the 4.37, the 38-inch vertical. This kid's small, but he is super fast. And he's just 2 steps, full speed, instant acceleration, just electric. He led FBS. He had 54 runs of 10 yards or more this year. He's got the ability to just cut and go. man, if you could get this guy isolated on linebackers, he's going to burn them at will. 5 yards per game as a freshman, 6.4 yards per carry, I should say, as a sophomore, 7.4 yards a carry as a junior. Just an elite receiver. And then, you know what? He also has the same thing that Elijah Mitchell had. He only had 2 fumbles his entire career for the East Carolina Pirates. I love that program, East Carolina. I think it's underrated, but I love this kid, Keaton Mitchell. He is my favorite dynamic speed guy. I think if there's one spot that the Niners can invest a spot in this draft that we're not envisioning, I think they can either go for the super burner running back or the super burner receiver. I think there's one pick for just an electric, either return man, receiver, running back, and there's a number of guys. Darius Davis from TCU. There's a lot of burners, but I love Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina. Have you seen Mitchell play at all? And is there somebody that you're like, man, the Niners don't need that player. He's more of a luxury than a need, but man, he would change the dynamic.
I think that so I haven't watched extensive tape on Mitchell, but the thing that really stood out to me was the 10-yard split. I think his 10-yard split was like 1.49, which screams 49er. Like that ability to just accelerate that quickly is extremely valuable. And I'm with you. I think that more teams need to have just a willingness to spend a draft pick every year. Like, people argue you should take a quarterback every year. I think you should take an explosive playmaker every year and worry about how you're going to get them the football after. You get them in the building first and you figure that stuff out later, because I do think that there are certain things that you just can't teach. And having that electric ability to start and stop on a dime is something that will always translate to the next level. And hey, if you spend a 4th or 5th round pick on a guy like that and it doesn't work out, you cut your losses and you move on. And especially if you're the 49ers, where you're going to have 5 or 6 of these picks every single year from all the compensatory picks they're racking up, you can afford to take more swings on guys like that. I'm trying to think if there's a player who, I really liked I guess you could label him like the H-back from North Dakota State. I don't know how much of a need they'd have for him now, because I still think Kyle Juszczyk's playing at a high level. But I really like the versatility to be able to play inline, line up in the backfield, do some of those things. It's not really a sexy pick by any means, but I definitely think that that's something that the Niners will always incorporate into their offense as long as Kyle's there. And I think it would give you a long-term heir apparent to Kyle Juszczyk. So I think that's an area where I could see them not really wanting to spend a pick on him now, because again, Kyle Juszczyk was just a Pro Bowler last season, still the best fullback in the game. But having somebody that does a lot of the same things that Kyle Juszczyk is able to do in this offense, I think it would be intriguing at the very least to kind of have a guy like that. If you could kind of stash them on the practice squad for a year and kind of get by the way they have with some other players like that. But there's not really like a sexy pick that, like a receiver or running back or somebody that I'm looking at where I'm like, oh, this guy would be electric. I'll be honest, I've been spending most of my time watching edge guys and offensive linemen. So I feel like those are more positions of need. But the receiver, I'm blanking on the name. I apologize. You might know the receiver from Liberty. I've heard really good things about too.
Mario Douglas.
Yes. And that's another guy. I think that fits that mold too. I remember because I watched a ton of Malik Willis. I was a big Malik Willis guy when he was at Liberty. So I think that, coming out of that program, I know when Malik Willis was coming out, it doesn't get the same level of buzz because it's a smaller school. It's not, you're not getting seen on Saturdays every week. So I think he's definitely a guy that's kind of flown under the radar who could be pretty good. So
that's a great one. Demario Douglas. If people haven't seen him, his stop and start, he's not 5'8", 175 pounds, another small guy, but man, this good luck trying to tackle this guy. His stop and start ability is just freakish. This is the guy who wins at tag, and in the schoolyard, you can't tag this guy at all. His body control's crazy, and he's probably going to be there late on day 2. So that's a good name. How about, you mentioned edge rushers? Why don't we, a couple last ones here. Give me your thoughts on the edge rushers. Is there an edge rusher that you're like, man, this would be, now there's a bunch that are going at the top of the draft, right? Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Miles Murphy, Nolan Smith. maybe even Will McDonald. I think Isaiah Foskey. I think these guys are all going in round 1. That's my guess. I think at least 6 go in round 1. It's a great year for edge players. Who's the edge player that you really like that you think might be in their range to get?
Oh, it's really funny because I love the speed rushers. Bend is always the first thing that I look for in edge rushers because I think that's the most valuable trait. That's extremely difficult to teach. You can get better at it, but I just feel like some guys have it and some don't. But the player that I've come away with liking the most probably wouldn't be the first person that you'd think of when you say that. And it is Viliami Fehoko from San Jose State.
Wow.
I got to go watch him in person last week, and I thought that he had much better bend than maybe people had alluded to. And I went and watched a few of his games on tape, and I saw it there. But he's a big guy. He's 6'4". He weighed in, I think, at like 282 at his pro day, but he was playing around 275. A ton of power in his punch. When he lands a strike, he's really good with that club move. But what really blew me away watching these games back, Larry, was he had a great counter when his initial rush wasn't there, where he'd go to this kind of inside spin move, and he was extremely agile. And people might play down the competition, but he demolished some of these teams in the Mountain West. He was the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. He had 9 sacks, 19 and a half tackles for loss. He had a couple games. He had a game against, I think it was Hawaii, where he had 13 pressures in that game, 2.5 sacks. And I was extremely, extremely impressed with his pass rushing repertoire and the just deep bag of moves that he had. And his ability to set up these moves with the just raw power he had in his bull rush. Really good defender against the run as well. I had some clips on my Twitter of him that I posted last week where you can see that explosion off the line. And it was really interesting because they had him stand up a ton where he wasn't really down in a 3-point stance. He didn't have his hand in the dirt, and he was still extremely agile for his size, being big. And I think he would be great for the 49ers as a guy that could be their base down, starting edge, or be in a rotation at least to be one of the base down edges, and then would thrive getting kicked inside to that 3-tech role where we've seen Arden Key and Amenahue have so much success isolating on guards on the interior. So he's the guy I came away really liking. I know another guy Brad had kind of put me on to, who I'm growing more and more fond of the more I learn about, is Jose Ramirez out of Eastern Michigan. Yeah, a little bit more of a developmental guy. But, there's the flashes of that, like Brad was like, hey, this guy's the D Ford clone. Like this is the next, D Ford kind of prospect. And I think for the 49ers, they have the luxury of kind of developing a guy like that. But, really quickly to end on Fehoko, what really drew me to him was I think he would really complement Drake Jackson well. And the two of them would be an extremely dynamic duo opposite of Nick Bosa. And I'm a very big believer in Drake Jackson. I think he has the tools to be a really good edge rusher. He has that bend that, I covet so highly. And I think that Fehoko would be the perfect complementary piece where you combine those two and have them be that kind of timeshare opposite Nick Bosa, and you have a really dynamic, edge rushers at both spots.
Yeah, no, I love Fehoko. He's a St. Francis kid from Mountain View. He's Vita Vea's second cousin. I didn't realize that, but he's cousins with him. And the game that I saw, I didn't watch San Jose State a lot, but they played Nevada this year. 12 tackles, 2 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. I mean, the guy was everywhere. And Red Hall's kid, Cade Hall, is also, plays on this same line. He's not quite the pass rusher that Fehoko is, but I like both those guys. I mean, Fajoko's a day 3 guy, probably. Cade Hall's probably an undrafted guy, but man, he would be one of the first guys that I would have on my list to call. The guy after the draft, the guy that you got to see to me is Dawan Johnson from Toledo. Toledo's got an underrated program there in the MAC. That's where they got Womack from last year. But Dawan Johnson, kind of a combo defensive tackle, defensive end. He's 275, and he's played some inside. But, man, I mean, this guy's really something. He shoots gaps. He's got great strength. He's got motor. Dawan Johnson. So if you get a chance, check him out as well. Good stuff, man. What do you got going on this week? What are you working on? I know you guys over at Niners Nation are doing some incredible stuff at all times. If I go to Niners Nation this week and I'm look up Jordan Elliott, what am I going to find?
So I admittedly haven't really been diving too deep into the quarterback stuff because Kyle Posey's been at the owners' meetings in person. So he's I've just kind of taken a step back and allowed him to handle it. So I apologize for anybody looking for more stuff like that. I'll probably have something this week, kind of just expanding my thoughts on things a little bit. I did something that went up this afternoon about the spending disparity between the defensive line and the secondary and how the 49ers having an extremely cost-efficient secondary allowed them to go out and make a bigger investment into Javon Hargrave. They have 26.4% of the salary cap is diverted to the defensive line, while only 8.6 is diverted to the secondary. So realistically, we always hear, Larry, about how the pass rush sets up the secondary, and the secondary only looks so good because of the pass rush. But from a roster construction standpoint, the defensive line wouldn't be able to keep accumulating all of these blue chip players without the secondary playing at a high level and having guys like Lenore and Hufanga contribute so much on a rookie deal. Having a guy like Isaiah Oliver come in on such a team-friendly deal, or Tashawn Gibson playing at such a high level, started all 20 games and only accounted for, I think it was 0.8% of the salary cap going forward is what he's on the books for this year. So that's kind of where my focus is now. I'm kind of trying to dive into the numbers a bit of the roster construction, look at kind of where the dollars have been spent, where they're going to be spent going forward. And I have some draft stuff lined up with some prospects who I like, who I think would be a good fit for the 49ers. So that's the main thing I'm going to be focusing on the next couple of weeks. Effectively just, a one-on-one interview I have with these guys, the stuff that I pull away that I think is pretty good, I'll add in quotes and then add some clips and some stats and stuff, and hopefully just give kind of a specialized profile of some guys and why I think they would be a good fit for the 49ers. Speaking of Fehoko, it was funny. I was talking to him after the pro day, and he's a local guy. Went to St. Francis, grew up in East Palo Alto, big 49ers fan growing up, big 49ers, lineage in the family. The family is 49ers fans. So if he was able to stay local and they would draft him, I know there'd be a lot of people who'd be very happy from what he was telling me. So just kind of, little stuff like that where I think there's more to it. There's a defensive back. I don't know if you had the chance to watch him at all, who I really like. Mekhi Blackman, who was at USC, came from Colorado. Yeah. He's another local guy from East Palo Alto, played at College of San Mateo. That's where I went to college for the brief stint I had. So unearthing stuff like that, on the surface, there's so many of these guys, you may not get the chance to see, but I'm trying to do some more profiles where adding the tape and the numbers and then maybe a little bit extra beyond that and just get a better sense of some of these guys.
I'd love to hear your breakdown on Riley Moss. I don't know how much you watch of Iowa, but Riley Moss was just a terrific player in the Big Ten. And I don't know that he's a corner. I mean, he's a corner right now. He might be a nickel corner. He might be a free safety. But man, I mean, this guy jumped a bunch of routes. He's just a damn good player. And, we don't see a lot of white corners anymore. That's for sure. This guy might be the last of his kind. But this guy actually, I think, might be able to play in the NFL, believe it or not, on the corner. Even if he can't play corner, as a day 3 pick as a free safety, Moss is a hell of a coverage player. He just made a lot of big plays for the Iowa Hawkeyes. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because that's the first thing that gets brought up, right? It's like people go back. I remember when I was a kid growing like Jason Sehorn on the Giants, right? And it's like there's been this big gap. Where we haven't seen, a white guy playing cornerback in the NFL. I was really impressed with the athletic profile, but it's really tough to evaluate because I feel like with Iowa, like their defense is really good and it has been good for some time. That it's really hard to isolate the play of some of these guys and separate it from the product of the defense. The sum of all parts. So I haven't watched extensively, to be honest, but I do agree that maybe he would be better suited for a safety role rather than playing corner. I think he's extremely rangy and has really good instincts and could be somebody that could play that kind of deep third safety role. But I try not to have too strong opinions of guys I haven't watched too closely. And I haven't really spent too much time watching Riley Moss because I thought that he might be off the board by the time the Niners would be picking.
MF in the chat with the last question for you before we let you go. He says, thoughts on the Giants outlook for 2023, Jordan. I know you're a Bay Area guy, so you're a Giant fan. You're a Warrior fan. You're watching all this stuff. I talked to FP Santangelo earlier today. Where are you on the Giants this year? Over or under 500?
I think over 500. I think they're going to be a good team that's just boring, and I would love to be wrong about that. But I also think that, like I love baseball for what it's worth. Like I will always love baseball. It's just, it feels like the last couple of, even the year they won 107 games, it felt like, them pulling out these close wins was obviously exciting, and there was a lot of really close games, but there wasn't this like draw. Like I remember it was like almost like a joke, getting excited for like Darren Ruff hitting home runs, which, hey, it's great. I'm not complaining, but that only can last for so long before it's like, man, like it'd be really cool if there was like one singular player that drew me to the ballpark. And I was spoiled, and I think a lot of us were. I remember, circling Tim Lincecum starts on the calendar and making it a point to go to the ballpark when Tim Lincecum was pitching, or Bumgarner, even way back when Barry was there. He was the greatest show in sports. And I'm not asking for that level because that's almost impossible to find, but give me something, right? Like give me something that I can get up and get excited about. Like I'll be completely honest with you. Last year when the schedule came out, the only game that I was like, I have to go to this game and I have to be there for this was when they did the E40 bobblehead, because E40's greatest rapper of all time. He's a Bay Area legend. I'm like, I need to get the E40 bobblehead. It had absolutely nothing to do with the roster or the team itself. So I'm going to watch because I'm a fan, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I won't be invested, but I just really want to be entertained, Larry. And I would love to see them land a guy or have a prospect come out. I know you really like Schmidt. Just have a guy that, I'm like, I got to get to the ballpark to watch this guy. I got to get in early and watch this guy take BP, or I got to watch this guy throw bullpen before the game. And right now, like outside of like Logan Webb, like it's just, to me, I don't really see a guy on the roster that's doing it for me. So,
no, I hear you. All right, everybody, give it up for Jordan Elliott. No, that was laughter. There we go. Woo! All right. Good stuff, Jordan. Hey, we love reading you in Niners Nation. Keep up the great work. Man, the Niners off season is never dull. And hopefully in a week or so, we'll get you back on and pick your brain on what else they do. But I love the stuff that you guys do at Niners Nation. I love, all your stuff, all Kyle Posey stuff. Really enjoy you guys' stuff. So keep it rolling. I know Niner fans are just like me. They love seeing your guys' newest stuff and are hitting that site probably 10, 12 times a day. Keep it rolling, man. And thanks for jumping in on the Krug Show and giving us some of your knowledge.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I sometimes I can be long-winded with my responses. I write, so I'm used to cranking out 1,200, 1,500 words, where I'm like, hey, if somebody's investing the time to read some of this, they're going to probably read all of it. So I try to be good about condensing stuff. I obviously am not great at it yet, but I appreciate your patience and anyone watching when I get on these longer-winded.
No, man, don't even apologize, man. You rock. We're big fans. Keep it rolling, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Larry. Have a good one.
You too. The great Jordan Elliott. Okay, we got a couple. We want to get into the super chats here. I'm Bob Dole. Said Larry didn't read one of my super chats. Heartbroken. Oh, no. Wait a second. Give it time. I'm Bob Dole. Says Larry loves Trey. Facts from Bob Dole. See, there you go. There was the super chat that you sent before. And we also have another one in here from John Wayne, who says, please stop trying to trade Trey Lance. When the Warriors go down in battle, capable replacements are needed to step in. The 49ers need 3 good quarterbacks. All right. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that at all. All right. We've got a bunch of other chats that are really interesting that I starred. I starred some chats. That's right. So we'll see if your chat was starred coming up next. But first, let me tell you that we are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Man, if you have not tried Pig and a Pickle, you need to try it. Get the brisket chili. They're open 7 days a week in Corte Madera. They're open Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. If you don't know what it looks like, well, it looks a little bit like this.
So New York style sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never gonna deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
And do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it, guaranteed.
All right, welcome back to the Krug Show. We got this super chat from Michael. He says, if we trade Trey Lance and acquire the 11th pick in the draft from Tennessee, Paris Johnson Jr., Anthony Richardson, Michael Mayer are there, whom do you pick? Wow. Now that is a tough one. You're going maybe the top offensive tackle, set up Paris Johnson, position of need. Anthony Richardson is 6'4", 230, and is electric fast. I mean, you're talking about maybe the greatest athlete at the quarterback position we've seen come out in the draft since Michael Vick. I mean, this guy is a tremendous athlete. And then you got Michael Mayer, who's a difference-making tight end, who I think is one of the safest picks in the entire draft. You know what? If that actually happened, and they had the 11th pick in the draft, and those 3 guys are on the board, I'm taking Anthony Richardson. I can't pass on Anthony Richardson. I would not pass on Anthony Richardson. He's 6'4", 230, and runs 4.4, and is just a difference maker on the goal line. But, man, you're moving Trey because Brock Purdy's your number 1 guy, and you got Sam Darnold. But Anthony Richardson is just a freaky athlete. It would be, I wouldn't go with the offensive tackle. It would be a debate between Anthony Richardson or trading down a few spots and taking Michael Mayer. That's what I'd be choosing between. But that is a great question. And that is a tough question for me to answer. Breaking 80 makes a donation. He says, hey, Larry, which offensive tackles do you think are a good fit for the Niners? Warren McClendon seems to be all over the board. Would you take 2 offensive tackles? Now that they picked up Pryor, now that they have Colton McKivitz, you still have Burford. You've got Zakel, who could probably maybe fill in. You got Jalen Moore. I don't think I'm take 2. But you never know. The guy that I kind of like, there's a couple guys I like. I mean, Dawan Jones from Ohio State is 6'8", 375 pounds. But when you watch his film, I'm concerned about whether or not he can bend at that size. And, I kind of wonder if Dawan Jones is just a guard. In today's NFL, the biggest guys on the line play guard. It used to be that the biggest guys in the line played tackle. House Ballard didn't play guard. He played tackle for Buffalo. He was huge. One of the biggest offensive linemen in the history of the NFL. But for the most part, the biggest guys seems like the real immovable monsters inside, the true 2-gappers, are playing guard now. You got to have movement ability to play tackle. Von Miller's coming off the edge. Safeties are coming off the edge. Guys with real speed are coming off the edge. I think we just all witnessed what happens when you have an offensive tackle that has a hard time dealing with edge speed in Mike McGlinchey. McGlinchey's whole game was broken down at times because he couldn't handle edge speed. So I would say the guys that I think potentially could be on the board, Blake Freeland, BYU, Jalen Duncan from Maryland, Tyler Steen from Alabama. Those are the guys that I really like in the 3rd round. If you wait till like the 5th round, Nick Saldiveri from Old Dominion, Alex Palszewski from Illinois. Go watch those 2 guys. I'll even throw in the guy that Jordan just threw out, Melasala Mave Laulu. I mean, good luck to Greg Papa and Tim Ryan pronouncing that guy's name. They're going to call him Big M. Watch, I guarantee you. Niners get that guy. He's Big M from now on. But those are the guys that I kind of like. I also like McClendon Curtis, who's a college guard from Tennessee that I think could transition to right tackle in the NFL. But those are the guys that kind of stand out to me as far as the tackles. All right, let's get to the starred chats. Whose chat? I've got 27 chats and have been starred. I'll add a 28th right here. MF says, is Pecan going to come on and talk draft like the good old days? You know, Pecan's selling steel. So I don't know if Pecan is even up on the draft. And truth be told, Pecan worked his butt off to give you guys those draft profiles. That wasn't off the lid. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he's just sitting there in the room and, you know, you say a player and he just goes off on that thing. He would go do his research, find out data, inside information, draft guy, you know, draft dude nuggets. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, Pecan, that's what I love about Pecan. Pecan was a hustler. He was a hustler. He didn't just sit there and say, you name a player, I'll tell you what I know off the dome. No. He would go do his thing. He would go do his thing and go do research. And that's why, in a way, you don't want him on just live because that stuff that he gave you wasn't live. But at the same time, anytime you can talk ball with Pecan will be a good thing. So yes, MF, I will get Pecan on and we will chop it up, as they say. All right, let's go to the starred chats. Who's got the starred chats? There are 30 starred chats. Who is starred? Who's chats? And we had thousands of chats, pages upon pages of chats. Whose chat was starred? All right, here we go. Lot Hat Truth 05. Purdy's going to decline when the league has film on him. Really? I don't buy that at all. Nacho Busyness or Nacho Business, like not yo business. Nacho Business 691. No one hates Trey. People just want the best quarterback. I think that's well said. Nobody hates Trey. Come on. I'm Bob Dole with his Larry Loves Trey. Facts from Bob Dole. There we go. Sacktown Izzy. Only trolls mention race. Thank you, Sacktown. Appreciate that. Daniel Tate. Larry's crushing it. Congrats on this ever-growing station. Thank you. And where are we numbers-wise? Let's see where we're at. We're getting close to 16,000. If you've yet to hit like and subscribe, please do. If you hit like, that just helps the algorithm, help more people find us. If you hit subscribe every time we go live, you'll be alerted that we're going live. We have 15,819 subs. So if you're one of the 350 people still hanging in the room, hit like and subscribe. And then, of course, if you want to be a channel member, it's $4.99 a month, and we bring our channel members exclusive content. Bomber T says racism is a Stone Age way of thinking. There you go. How could you not agree? Jorn Anderson, Niners wanted the end product without doing the project. That's a great one. I think he's right on the money there. I think the 49ers wanted Trey Lance to become Patrick Mahomes. They just didn't want to do the work and put in the time that it takes because they want to win now. They just said, you know what? We're going to take the best prospect with the best upside. We're going to put him through the best process, and bingo, bango, we're going to have our guy. And I think it makes sense, but it assumed an awful lot, maybe too much. Big Dez, I'm starting to wonder about Kyle Shanahan. You don't even look at Patrick Mahomes. You passed on a Hall of Famer in Tom Brady. You killed RG3. Things are starting to mount. There you go. A lot of truth, 05. Brock isn't the guy. Just straight across. 6-0. 8-0 if you want to count the playoffs. Not the guy. Charlie Higgs, Kyle and John have seen Trey way more than we have. There's a reason that they're both hesitant to give him the job. Charlie, that's a great one. That's why I starred that one. That is a great one, because that we need to keep reminding ourselves. And it's interesting, the two sports. In baseball, you could question Gabe Kapler every day of the week. There's a lefty on the mound. Here comes a pinch hitter. It's going to be either the guy who's due up or the pinch hitter that he's going with. You can do a quick check of the stats and see, what does Mike Yastrzemski hit against lefties? What does Mike Yastrzemski hit against righties? Whatever it is. Or what does Mike Yastrzemski hit against lefties as opposed to Wilmer Flores? What does he? And yet in baseball, people are like, I don't know. The manager knows more than me. Really? I think that's the sport where you actually can question the manager. But instead, we question the football offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator when there's a million variables that go into a play call. Grant calls himself quality control. I used to be quality control. That was my job. That was my title. I know what it takes to put together a game plan. There's a ton that goes into an individual play call. A ton. You could be putting out a play that you just want to put on film for next week's opponent. You may just try to throw somebody off your scent. You may be self-scouted yourself and you want to put out other stuff to kind of make those numbers not as strong. There's all kinds of things. There's personnel reasons. There's scheme reasons. There's coaching reasons. There's all kinds of reasons that you could have a particular play in a particular situation on offense or defense. And yet people will sit there and be like, well, I watch all the games. I can question Kyle Shanahan. No, you can't. Have you noticed that I think I know a lot about football, but I hardly ever am on here questioning like Robert Sala's call, or hardly ever my D'Amico blew it with this blitz. You never see me ever do videos on Shanahan doesn't understand how to make this play call. He made the wrong call in this situation. Never, ever. I talk football all day, every day, all year long. I never do a video where I'm questioning Kyle's play call, questioning the decision to have Tyler Kroft block, Hassan Reddick. Like it was some freaky thing that he was just a wild move. There's all kinds of things that go into play calls. And when you don't know, when you do know, you know what it means to know. And when you know what it means to know, and you've spent 100 hours analyzing it, rolling that film back and forth, you know when you don't know. You know when you haven't put in the work. So I used to work 110-hour weeks. I used to know. But I don't put in 110-hour weeks. I watch the game maybe 3-4 times. It seems like a lot, but it's still nothing compared to CFO or Chris Kocherik or Kyle or even Lynch or any of their scouts. So I'll tell you players in the draft that I like, but when they draft guys that I hadn't endorsed, I don't sit there and go, bust, huge nightmare pick. I usually go spend a bunch of time watching that player to see, what did I miss? What did they see I didn't see? And usually I find it. I didn't love the Brock Purdy pick when that pick was made, and I saw Brock Purdy at Iowa State. But when I watched the film and when I went back and read his whole lead up to the draft and what he had done and how he evolved, and I saw the film, I'm like, you know what? They may have got something here. And I still didn't say it. I still waited till minicamp. And then once I saw it in minicamp, I'm like, if I see this in training camp, I'm going with it. I saw it in training camp and I went with it. So, I mean, I don't know anything more than anybody else. I'll just take the time and do the work when I have time. Jan Chosla. Sam Darnold got the Alex Smith treatment, 5 OCs in 6 years. Yeah, it's funny. If you want to say what was the eye-opener quote today from Kyle Shanahan, outside of the fact that he basically indicated that they would take offers for Trey Lance in trades going into the draft, it was what he said about Sam Darnold. He basically said, you can see his ability. I've always liked him as a prospect. I always liked the way he throws. Then you go read the Darnold deal. He's had 5 offensive coordinators in 6 years. There's no continuity there. He's been on the crappy Jets and the crappy Panthers. The Niners are hoping they caught lightning in the bottle, and they may have. We'll see. Krug, any praise of Lance's play would be fake. He hasn't played enough, and the little he did play wasn't great. I agree. Sean Wilford. Larry's a pimp. Thank you. I think. Nick Money Meyer. Hey, at Sports Larry K, I'm here. Hey, Nick. Good to see you're here. Anybody who announces they're here, that's awesome. I mean, that's just worth repeating right there. Bomber T, who's a huge fan, maybe my biggest fan. Larry's a legend. If he had said Larry's a nightmare, do you think I would have put that up there? Sean Wilford. Larry is a pimp daddy. See, I went with Larry is a pimp and Larry is a pimp daddy. TK says Larry rules. TK, if you had said Larry sucks, there's no chance you would have made the starred version. Green glass full. Larry has the best brisket. No, I don't. Pig in a pickle has the best brisket. John Wayne, I already put this up there, but I'll do it again. Please stop trying to trade Trey Lance. When Warriors go down in battle, capable replacements are needed to step in. The 49ers need 3 good quarterbacks. It's interesting that you would say that, John, because Kyle said he's going with 2 on the roster. I did see that. Here's another one from the man who just announced his presence, Nick Money Meyer. Trey for Zach Wilson. What do you think? In a 4th rounder? Or is he going to Tennessee for a 2nd rounder and a swap of draft picks? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I like Zach Wilson. And I think Zach Wilson's going to be good. And I know Zach Wilson hasn't been good to date, and the Jets have to move him. He's persona non grata. He said some things he shouldn't have said. So what? Who cares? Kid's a huge talent. And absolutely, I would take him in a heartbeat. I would take Zach Wilson. And I think Shanahan would too. I'm Bob Dole. Larry, take Joe Staley to Pig in a Pickle, get him beefed up, and we'll sign him to fill the tackle spot. I miss Joe Staley, man. Joe Staley was absolutely the man. SLLL. When I watched Michael Mayer, it looked like Mark Bavaro reincarnate. Yeah. Bavaro was stronger, but Mayer's better. Brainer Bird 3000. I love playing Madden and listening to Krueger in the background. All right. I like that. You know what I do to my kids in Madden? When my kids say, Dad, play Madden against us, I'll get like a run play. I'll make sure they get into some kind of nickel or dime defense. And then I'll get a run play. And then I'll just no huddle. And I just no huddle their ass to death. And then I'll get the, what's it called when you slam the controller down and you storm off? I forget exactly what it's called. My son said it about my other son. It was classic though. He just threw down the remote and he's like, I've had it. I'm out of here. Joey Nichols. I'd take Ramirez if he were there in the 6th round. I'm talking about Jose Ramirez. Eastern Michigan. Same school that produced Max Crosby. This guy had the best 3-cone at the combine. He looked unblockable at the East-West game. This guy's got crazy bend. Now, I don't know that he's the size that the Niners like in their DNs. They usually go for guys around 270. This guy's more like 240, 250. So I don't know about that. But I'd take him. I would take him in a heartbeat. Uncle Salty is throwing out 2 of my favorite guys in the entire draft with this one. He says Atabare I think it's Aditomiwa Atabare from Northwestern is the early round version of Dawan Johnson. Uncle Salty, That is fucking spot on. That is absolutely spot on. And Atabare is nutty good, but I think he's going in maybe end of the first. Once I saw him dominate at the Senior Bowl, then I saw his workout in Indy. I'm like, that guy's going in the first round. And if he doesn't go in the first round, man, somebody's going to be thrilled to get him in the second round, but he ain't coming anywhere close to pick 99 is where the Niners pick. But Dawan Johnson out of Toledo, they can get him, and he's a baller too. Joey Nichols, Keon White, absolute stud, no question. G-Tech. Now, there you go. That guy's 270. That's the kind of guy the Niners would draft to fill their defensive end spot. Keon White. Remember that name. He's a monster. Terradome in the house. Krug! The exclamation points. Terradome. There you go. And we got this one. Tammy McDaniel, who sometimes is negative. She says, Larry, you need to ask the tough question. Okay. Tammy, who asks tougher questions typically than me? Now, Grant is great at it. It's funny. Grant asks Shanahan questions, and then he'll post like 19 different times Shanahan should be fired. Or basically, not necessarily straight a quote like that, but he'll be like suggesting that Shanahan should be fired. And yet Shanahan never breaks. I guarantee you, Kapler couldn't handle that. If Grant started tweeting out every day, Kapler should be fired, and then was in there in the post game, there's no way Kapler would be able to answer his questions the way that Shanahan answers Grant's questions. I give Shanahan a lot of credit, man. He's the real deal. He can look Grant in the eye, know that he's staring at a guy who just advocated to 60,000 people on YouTube that he be fired, and he doesn't show any resentment. He doesn't sweat it. It's like he's bigger than it. It's amazing. It really is amazing. MF says, I couldn't believe Gabe Kapler said this Giants roster is the best he's had since he's been here. He did? He said that? You got to be kidding me. I'm shocked by that. I cannot believe he said that. You had Buster Posey. Did he really say that? MF, are you sure he said that? Somebody's going to have to send me that. I don't know that he said that. Mark Lopez. Larry, realistically, what does Trey get you in draft compensation? And who are the best suitors? Well, I think you could probably say who are the best suitors. I don't know who the best suitors are. I would say that everybody who needs a quarterback who's outside the top 7 is at least going to check on what it's going to take for Trey. So Atlanta's got Desmond Ridder. I expect them to make a call. Tennessee's got Tannehill and the kid from Liberty. They're going to probably call. That's Rand Carthon. If somehow the Texans, for whatever reason, did not go quarterback at the top, the Texans may call. The Jets, I think the Jets definitely should have interest. Even if they get Aaron Rodgers, they ought to have interest. And then after that, I don't know. Washington, maybe. Tampa, maybe. Seattle, maybe. Miami, maybe. Baltimore, if they lose Lamar, maybe. Minnesota, if they're tired of Cousins. This kid's from Marshall, Minnesota, maybe. Other than that, that's probably it. That's probably the list right there. I think there's, between pick 8 and let's say 20, 22, I think there's some teams there that are going to need a quarterback that may call the Niners. And you know what? Trey Lance is ready to play right now. And even though people think that he hasn't developed at all, he has developed. We just don't know the nuances of the position well enough to say exactly how, and he hasn't played, so we haven't seen it. But I guarantee you, if I had Brian Greasy in here, he would tell you 19 different ways that Trey's improved from earlier in this year, or from last year even. And Shanahan would speak to it, I'm sure. Tammy McDaniel, Larry is the man. There you go. Fish and chips. You're lazy, Larry, lazy. And that voice is the great Bill Urbanek, the late great Bill Urbanek. Bomber T says, MF, what? Farhan got extended? Yeah, Farhan's extended to 2024, which is in line with Kapler's contract. It makes sense. Mo G says, great show. Thank you. Green Glass Full says, hey, man, that's Grant's shtick, pretending he knows about football. LOL. Grant knows a lot. We're not going to bag on Grant. Grant's seriously, anybody who wants to bag on Grant, I usually just tune them out. Why? Because Grant is a good dude, and Grant's helped me quite a bit. He's shown a lot of graciousness. Come on. Good. As far as I'm concerned, I'll say this. I know him better than you know him. And sometimes there's not a lot of things where I look at the audience and just say, trust me, I know more than you. I hardly ever say that. I scouted in the NFL, scouted in the CFL. How many times do people call up with football opinions and I say, I know more than you? Never. But in this situation, I know more than you. About Grant. I know Grant. You guys only know public Grant. I know Grant as a friend. And he's a good dude. So anytime people bag on him or his dad, I always push back. Why? Because they're my friends. And I've battled with those guys before. We haven't, I mean, heck, you have strong opinions like Lowell Cohn, like Larry Krueger, like Grant Cohn. Heck yeah. Do you think we agree all the time? Hell no. But it's civil. It's professional. Charlie says Larry should retroactively beat Grant in the content creator Final Four with the line, Grant calls himself quality control. I used to be quality control. 40 votes. He beat me by 40 freaking votes. Where were you people? You people. No, I'm just joking. If I first of all, I should have been in a better bracket. If I was in a better bracket, I'd still be there. Well, I don't know. By now I'd be dead, but you know what I'm saying. Soup says Larry's in the clubhouse. I want to be on Kyle's good side. I can understand that. Are you saying that I want to be on Kyle's good side? How's it benefited me? I mean, seriously, how is I think I'm a pretty straight shooter. I don't really have agendas at this point. I'm bringing you straight honesty. You know, I mean, that's just it. Tammy says, Larry, that's the problem. You need to ask the tough question. She's always banging on me. Stop banging on me. I ask tough questions. Here we go. Mark Graves, 110-hour week, Larry. You're lazy, Larry, lazy. Yeah, that was Urbanek. I told him I work hard. He said, you don't work fucking hard. I'll show you hard work. I said, I work hard. He said, okay, you come in at whatever time you want. You leave whatever time you want tomorrow. I said, okay. And I said, I'm going to show him. I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I stayed till like 8, 9 o'clock at night. I said, Coach, I put in 14 hours. And he's like, you're lazy. He's like, I'll pick you up tomorrow. And I said, okay, what time are you going to be at my house? I'll be there 1:45. You better be outside. I'm like, 1:45? He's like, 4:45. He picked me up at 4:45. He dropped me off at the end of that day at 1:15. He said to me as I'm getting out of the car, and I'm living, this is in college. I'm living with college guys. They're smoking 6-foot bongs. They're taking mushrooms. They're up on the roof. They're partying. They got co-eds. They got pool tables and kegerators and you name it. I'm walking in. These guys are walking, basically coming back from a bar. I'm walking in at 1:15. He says to me, I'll see you at 4:45. And then he rolls down the window. He's like, fuck you. And I'm like, Jesus, come on, coach. Sure enough, 4:45. He was there. Those were the hours I worked when I worked in pro football. 4:45. I had to be out on the curb. And I got dropped off at home at 1:15. 1:15. So, and once I found out the radio hours, I was like, wow, I'll do this every day. Is it Riyadh? Reed? He says, Larry, stay pimping. Tammy, Larry needs to ask the tough question. What question? What question do you want? Mark Gray says Larry's giving twofers on the super chats. Nate Dogg, Pimp Daddy Larry is what all my friends say. Okay. Joey Nichols, Zach Wilson is literally the worst quarterback in the history of the league. Telling you, man, he's coming back. Joey Nichols, when he comes back and plays well, you come back in on this show and say, Krug, you know way more than me, because I thought he was nothing. Because he's coming back. Jordan Pena, is it possible to say Brock played good, team's not elite? Wait. Is it possible to say Brock played good, teams not elite ones? Not sure where you're going with that. Maybe I'm not reading that right. I'm not getting much out of that. But I do appreciate it, Jordan. Thank you for the donation. Here it is, Nick J. Rage quit. That's what it is. I made my kid rage quit by no huddling him to death. And they swore at me too. Terradome, Atabare is incredible. And don't forget, his first name is Adi Tamiwa. Could you imagine if you're like an announcer, you're Fitz, and you're Dave Fleming, you're doing a Northwestern game, and a sack, Adi Tamiwa, Atabare. And that's if you've studied your pronunciation guide. And all the good ones do, by the way. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you guys. I'm watching a show last night before the Giants-A's game. It's the Giants announcers. They're sitting around a table and they're talking ball. Mike Krueger starts telling a story about Lon Simmons. And man, it was the same experience that I had. 1997, I'm doing a Cambiar weekend show leading into a Cactus League game in March with Chris Townsend. We fly in. We have an early flight, like 6 a.m. We get into Arizona. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever. We immediately Scottsdale Stadium. We get into Scottsdale Stadium. There's nobody there. We go. Security guard lets us into the press box. We go upstairs. There's no lights on. There's nobody there. Lon Simmons is sitting in the corner of the press box. I said, Lon, how you doing? And I'd met him a couple times. And he was the kind of guy that if you called him Mr. Simmons, he immediately would say, it's Lon. It's Lon. So I'd met him a few times. So I said, Lon, hey, it's Larry Krueger. How you doing, man? Hey, Larry. He starts telling me stories. I just flew in this morning. I'm doing the game later today. And I go, what are you doing, Lon? And it was Giants Rockies. Lon Simmons was sitting there. This is 1997. Lon Simmons was doing Giants games, for decades prior to this. He had every reason in the world to just show up and wing it. He's sitting there in the corner of the press box with a Colorado Rockies media guide. And he's highlighting different things in the media guide for players that potentially would play that day that he wanted, little anecdotes that were in the media guide that he wanted to bring out on the broadcast. And then Krueger last night, when I'm watching this thing, said that Lon was a Hall of Famer who acted like a rookie his entire career. And damn if that wasn't my experience as well. I'm the guy who should have gotten there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm the guy who needed all the extra reps. But he was the guy sitting there highlighting the media guide because he wanted to be damn good and really up to date on the Rockies. Wow. I sat there and I was like, wow, that is a lesson. That is a lesson. And it convinced me. I always believed in prep. I went to St. Ignatius. I'm a guy who does his homework. I wasn't a great student, but I did my homework. But it told me that, man, you have to work hard. If you want to make it, you got to work hard. And these guys who are Hall of Famers, Krug, Kipe, John Miller, Dave Fleming, these guys don't wing it. They don't show up and wing it. They show up at 7 o'clock in the morning and highlight the media guide when they're already Hall of Famers. So it was a huge illustration to me of how you're supposed to do it. So when I heard Krug say that last night, I was like, damn if Mike ain't telling the truth. That was Lon Simmons. He worked hard all the time and hustled. It was incredible to watch. What a great guy. What an incredible sense of humor. Some of the greatest memories I've had as a media person, I did the post-game Sports Phone 680 after the wrap, and this was in the Candlestick days, I'd be in there. Ted Robinson, Kipe, Krug, John Miller, Lon. I mean, you're talking about some of the best broadcasters in our world, some of the best broadcasters in sports, all right there. And I'm coming on after those guys, and I'd just be sitting in the back of the room as they were chopping it up, making that rap, the incredibly successful thing that it's become. So that right there was, when I think about some of those moments, I think, wow, that was special. Michael says, is it worth going to a Giants game this year? Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Get out there, see a good game, enjoy the weather, root for your team. Sports is cyclical, man. You're going to win, you're going to lose. I don't think they look very good this year, but I've been wrong before. I thought they were a 500 team the year they won 107. Literally. I thought 500, absolutely 500. They won 107 games. It was the greatest team in the history of San Francisco. Amazing. So I've learned enough to say, you know what? Don't judge the book by the cover. Let's see what it looks like. Kapler's smart. Farhan's smart. They're very competitive. Let's see. To me, on paper, they're totally outgunned by the Dodgers and Padres. Let's see. Chrissy says, I loved Lon. Great announcer. Nick J. Lon was great. That is what the legends do. They work and they work until they retire. Uncle Salty. Go Cats. Sunset boys rule. There you go. Get the fist for that one. Fish and chips. Lon Simmons called my favorite Steve Young play against the Vikings in 88. Dude, I have a buddy who went to that game, who left and missed Steve Young's. He gets away again. He missed it. He was in the freaking lot. How would you that's bad. That is bad. That's one of the greatest moments in Bay Area sports history. Could you imagine if you went to that game, you paid the money, you're in the lot, you didn't see it. Everybody's coming out. Oh my God, incredible. Steve Young. Oh, what did he do? Cedric Van Pelt. Hey, Larry. You shaved your head. You look a lot like Phil Collins. Give us your rendition of In the Air Tonight. I got you. Hey, Larry, if you shaved your head, you'd look a lot like Phil Collins. Give us your rendition of In the Air Tonight. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Start singing on here. 14 Ace Windu. Larry, you lazy. Bouncer says Ryan Terrio coming on soon. Man, I love the Riot. I'm going to get him on a bunch this year. He's tremendous. He's living down in, I think, the Bayou, working for a station out of Atlanta, maybe. One of my favorite Giants of all times. Reed says, Krug, have you ever been to Canada? Appreciate you keeping me tapped in all the way up to all the way up in Toronto. I used to work in the Canadian Football League. So yes, you asked me about Canada. I tell you which province. Manitoba, been there. Vancouver, been there. Toronto, been there. Hamilton, been there. Saskatchewan, been there. Regina, not Regina, been there. Yeah, saw the Rolling Stones in Winnipeg. I was the only person who stood at the concert. Seriously. I'm looking around, I'm like, it's the Stones, people. Can we get off our feet? Can we get up on our feet and, clap our hands? No, I've never seen a crowd sit for an entire Rolling Stones concert. It happened in Winnipeg. The Voodoo Lounge Tour, 1994. Great show. Uncle Salty. I grew up on Lon. Oh, yeah. Come on, man. Lon Simmons. My late father was a huge fan of Lon Simmons. And when he passed, I had Tim Webb, my old producer at KMBR, put together kind of a montage of Lon's greatest moments. And, it was emotional for me to get through it because I love my father, of course. And I just thought of my father and how much he loved Lon. But I can remember when I first came to KMBR in the late 90s, my dad would be like, you get to meet Lon Simmons? I said, yeah, Dad, I've met him a bunch of times. He's a great guy. He's hilarious. Everybody loves him. He's super down to earth. And I remember my dad just thought that was the biggest thing, most incredible thing ever. Wow. And I remember him telling somebody, we were somewhere, he's like, my son met Lon Simmons. He gets to meet Lon Simmons. And my dad was not a bragger, but as far as bragging went, that was like as much as he'd ever brag. And it just made me feel so proud. But yeah, Lon Simmons, unbelievable guy. Bouncer says Russ Hodges and Lon, the best duo. No disrespect to Kruk and Kipe. Never heard Russ, but to me, Lon and Wayne Walker on the Niners, the best. Wayne Walker was freaking great. He was great, and Lon was great too. And Lon did baseball. Lon was just, I can remember the year that Mike Ivy, they hit the grand slam in the Chevy Chevette inning, and it was a weekend doubleheader or whatever, and Lon called it. I mean, I could hear that call to this day. It would give me chills. One more super chat from Jaguayo. Jaguayo. Hey, Jaguayo. He says, Larry, opinion on Felix and Adike Azuma. I think you're talking about the guy from K-State, right? Is that what you're talking about? The K-State defensive end. He's like 255. Great athlete. Really great athlete. He wore number 91. Unbelievable. He's a Missouri kid from KC. Really, really, really athletic. I don't know tons about him, but he's a terrific edge rusher. Unbelievable athleticism, crazy bend. He was a finalist for the Hendricks Award this year. He was a second team All-American. He was a finalist or semifinalist for the Bednarik. He was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, voted on by the coaches. So when you're the conference Defensive Player of the Year, man, that really tells me something. This guy's tremendous pass rusher. I haven't studied him, so I couldn't give you a good deep breakdown, but I've seen a little bit of him. Yeah. Good player for sure. Nick J says Thin Tim. Yeah, there you go. We got Cedric says the great Neil Young spent some time in Winnipeg. All right, we're almost ready to bolt. We have somebody who says Wendy Takuda and Wayne Walker. Tyler, Larry, have you watched any of Chris Harrison from Ohio State? Could have a Charles Menahue type impact. I think you're talking about Zach Harrison. And yes, I've seen a ton of him. He was a 5-star high school player who's from Ohio, who's just 6'6", 275, just an incredible player. He didn't have the kind of production with the Buckeyes that you would have thought he would have had, considering he was a 5-star recruit, but he was their team captain, tremendous athlete. I mean, they clocked this guy at 270 pounds at running a 4.47, and he ran a 10.700 and a 21.5 200. Yeah, and he was a 5-star guy. The year he came out of high school, he was the nation's number 1 defensive end. And then he went to the Buckeyes and he had a good career, but not a crazy great career. But yeah, one of those guys that if he's on the board when the Niners pick at 99, he might be my pick. I don't know that I could pass on Zach Harrison. You got Harrison on one side, you got Bosa on the other side. I mean, Zach Harrison could be just an absolute monster in the NFL. I really like him a lot. Tom Pierce said, Bill King dropped the mic. Yeah, Bill King. I mean, Bill, I did an interview with Bill King in the A's dugout at the Coliseum, 1998, I think, 1997 maybe. Ken Korak sees me, and I go, that's Bill King. And Ken Korak goes, oh, Larry, you never met Bill? And I go, no, I've never met Bill. I go, God, man, he takes me back to like almost why I wanted to be on the radio. I used to listen to Bill King do Warriors games in the 70s on the transistor in the sunset while I did my homework. Phil Smith over to this guy, over to that guy. I mean, nobody could do basketball. I love Tim Roy, but I mean, nobody could keep up with the speed of the game like Bill King. He was phenomenal on basketball. So he's like, yeah, Larry, you want to meet him? I can introduce you to him. I'm like, oh, it'd be incredible. So he goes, Bill, I want you to meet. This is Larry Krueger. He does the nights. And before he could get out, he does the nights. Bill King goes, on KMBR. I listened to him on the drive home. I mean, I absolutely almost fell to my knees in the dugout. I'm like, what? And Korak's like, he listens to you. He's a fan. I'm like, wow. I go, and then I didn't even go with Bill. I'm like, Mr. King, and he's like, oh, stop it. Bill, call me Bill. He did an interview with me. I wish I had it to this day. I don't have it. I don't know what happened to it. It's like 30 minutes in the dugout talking about growing up and how he was like a young man as a young broadcaster. And he was kind of like a peer of a lot of the young Raider players at the time. He was their age and talked about broadcasting Super Bowl 11. And, just Bill King, just absolute salt of the earth human being. Couldn't get any better than Bill King. And I walked home and I just said, I said, Bill, you made my day. You absolutely made my day. And then I thought he was BSing me. And because, he's like, oh, I listen all the time. And I thought, well, he's just saying it. He's just saying that. He's being nice. That's how nice of a guy he is. And then as I'm walking away, he's like, hey, Larry. I'm like, yeah. He goes, that was great last night when you hung up on that guy from Fremont. And I was like, I'm like, you are a listener. He's like, every night. And right then I was just like, I was floored. I was absolutely floored. And I remember calling my parents that weekend going, oh, I met Bill King. And he said he listens to my show. And then he quoted my show. Some great memories, great Bay Area sports memories. Last one of the night. Nick J says the Bay Area has had some of the world's greatest broadcasters. Still do. Dave Fleming is, I think, as good an announcer as there is in this country. I really believe that. And I'm not saying that because Dave's a buddy. I'm saying that because it's the absolute fucking truth. Tim Roy, super great. How great is Tom and Tim on 95.7 The Game doing the Warrior games? I think that might be the best duo there is. Tom and Tim are magic on the radio. Magic. I mean, that I can listen to Tommy and Tim talk about basketball for, hours on end. All right. 15 minutes from now, roughly 15 minutes from now, I'm going to be joining Vish Kumaran on the Vish Kumaran Show. Thanks to everybody who's in the chat. Thanks to everybody who donated. Thanks to everybody who supported the channel. Join me with Vish at 6:45. We're talking more Niners on his channel. Later tonight, I'm back. That's right. Let me just double check it. Got to double check. But I think I've got a confirmation from Crocker. I believe Crocker's coming on tonight. Double check that. Crocker tonight at 9. He says 9 p.m. works for me. Eric Crocker is going to join me at 9 o'clock. So I'm going to be sitting here talking nonstop. I got to get a drink of water. I'm going to join Vish. We're going to chop it up. Join us over there. Be back here at 9 o'clock for Eric Crocker and yours truly. Chopping it up.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer.